Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Sign in at the end of the world. Devour the Fire Lord at the beginning. Chapter 41. My powers can help soothe people's minds and inspire the kind and perseverance in people's hearts. In the smoke, Sun Yu's solemn and serious face was reflected. After the apocalypse, this hotel quickly fell into a zombie crisis, but fortunately our resort hotel occupies a vast area, leaving us enough time to clean up the mutated zombies. It is true that some unpleasant things happened during this period, but fortunately with the help of my powers, the awakened people and ordinary people in the hotel can coexist equally and survive together. Sun Yu carefully explained the stories that happened in the hotel in the past 2 years. In his words, it was as if this hotel had really been built into a paradise in the apocalypse. Only Mu Chu slightly squinted his eyes, and he deduced the hotel owner's strength the moment the light hit him. AB level Peak Awakener. He has power but is not greedy. Instead, he uses his ability to save survivors. Even the leaders of Yuhai base know how to use survivors to satisfy their own interests. Is this boss Sun really so selfless? Is there really such a great saint in the world? There are now more than 100 survivors left in the hotel. Most of these people were rescued by us in the past 2 years. They lived in our hotel and quickly became a part of the hotel. There are even other awakened people who are attracted by them. Come join us. After saying that, Sun Yu looked at Weilinger and others, smiled kindly, and said, "The situation in the hotel is roughly like this now. Although life is not as happy as before the apocalypse, everyone can at least survive together. Of course, if you are interested in the hotel also welcomes you to join us." After Sun Yu finished speaking, he looked expectantly at the team members. After all, if this team can join the hotel, it will definitely improve the strength of the entire hotel. As soon as this statement came out, the entire team was completely defeated. They have always been the ones searching for survivors in the ruins, either recruiting or rescuing them, and bringing them back to the base. This is the first time that a survivor team has invited people from their search team to join. Concubine Lu Qing admired Sun Yu's actions very much and stepped forward and replied, "Thank you very much, Boss Sun, for your kindness. However, our team still has a mission and we won't be able to stay here for too long. If Boss Sun needs any help, you can tell us, and we will report it to the base for help when we return to the base." Although the search team has the task of rescuing survivors in the ruins back to the base, this is all based on the needs of the survivors themselves, and the base does not insist on this. Sun Yu nodded, expressing his understanding, and then said, "In that case, I'll help you all. It's getting late. I have arranged accommodation and meals for you. Please rest in the hotel for one night and set off again tomorrow." Seeing this, everyone naturally found it difficult to refuse Sun Yu's kindness. The security guard took several more people away. Before leaving, Mu Chu, who was walking at the end of the team, turned around and suddenly gave Sun Yu a meaningful smile. For some reason, this spring-like smile made Sun Yu feel hairy in his heart, and his spine instantly trembled. As the premier luxury resort hotel in Linan City, the chefs here are naturally of the highest level. Almost as soon as a small team arrived at the restaurant, a team of dining cars had already arrived at the same time. The fat man who had been eating compressed biscuits for many days had never seen these high-end meals before. He picked up the steak on the table and wolfed it down. He was still muttering, "Boss, it's quite nice to be in this hotel. The food and drink are much better than in the base." At this time, Song Kongwa suddenly put down his chopsticks and said solemnly, "I have decided, I want to stay here." This move directly attracted everyone's attention. Only the confused Chi-Chi was holding a spoon and drinking the soup carefully. The fat man waved his hands quickly. "Hey Lao Song, I'm just talking, don't take it seriously." Everyone also looked at Song Kongwa with doubtful eyes. Chen Weo seemed to understand something and said, "Is it because of your brother?" Song Kongwa nodded and said, "Adong and I have grown up together since childhood. Adong once saved my life. I owe him a lot. We can't just leave him here. Besides, I am really tired of life in the base. When I go back, you will tell the superiors that I died while fighting the heretics." The atmosphere throughout the meal seemed a bit depressing. In addition to Song Konghua's decision to leave the team, it was more due to the lack of a strong person in the team and worries about the dangers that may be encountered in subsequent missions. Only Miu-Chu and Chi-Chi finished their meals seriously. Miu-Chu had a smile on his face from beginning to end. He didn't care much whether Song Kong was stayed or left. He only cared about what interesting things he could encounter later. As for Chi-Chi, she hasn't figured out the situation yet, but she is simply hungry. It was getting late, and a few kilometers away from the hotel were the ruins of the city filled with terrifying zombies and powerful heretics. The zombies were particularly ferocious in the dark, so it was undoubtedly unwise to set off at this time. After a brief discussion, everyone planned to accept the hotel owner's kindness and rest in the hotel for one night before setting off. After dinner, Song Kong, who his brother named Adong, led the team to a row of rooms on the third floor. The deep light flickered. Adong stood in the corridor, stretched out his only remaining arm and said, "New Century Resort Hotel welcomes you all to check in." Miu-Chu silently sensed that this Adong was also an awakened person, but his abilities were only sea level. Miu-Chu withdrew his gaze. He didn't even bother to swallow an awakened person of this level. When it came time to check into the room, the original plan was for Fatty and Miu-Chu to share a room, but Chi-Chi tightly held the corner of Miu-Chu's clothes with an innocent and cute expression on his face. Autumn. In this strange world, Chi-Chi has an instinctive dependence on Miu-Chu because of the rat charm. Miu-Chu smiled helplessly and said to everyone, "Let's do this. Me and Chi-Chi sleep in the same room." The fat man's teeth were itching with envy. How can it be inappropriate for a man and a woman to live together in the same room? But in my heart, I was also wondering why Miu-Chu was so lucky that he picked up a beautiful woman while out searching. I just regret why such a good thing didn't happen to me. Weilinger blushed even more with anger and wanted to say something, but she realized that this kind of thing was mutual love, and she, as an outsider, couldn't do anything. He could only chop his feet off and said angrily, "I pray that she has been mentally traumatized. Don't even think about taking advantage of her." After saying that, Weilinger raised her fair arm to warn Miu-Chu. Miu-Chu smiled bitterly and shook her head. This young lady was really not easy to deal with. Miu-Chu rubbed Lu Chi's pink hair and chuckled. "Don't worry, I won't let this child be wronged again. I have to say that this hotel is worthy of being the best in Lenan City. Not only are the bathroom facilities complete, but the decoration of the rooms is also luxurious and magnificent, making people suddenly feel like walking into a modern palace." When Miu-Chu walked into the room, Chi-Chi had already changed into a white nightgown. I saw Chi-Chi kneeling on the floor, with no expression on her beautiful and delicate face, staring blankly at the shining spherical chandelier on the ceiling, wondering what she was thinking. It wasn't until Miu-Chu stepped forward that Chi-Chi turned his head. A pair of red eyes seemed to contain dazzling stars, and the girl's heavenly voice came. "Autumn, really, can't you go back?" Miu-Chu stepped forward and rubbed the girl's head, saying softly, "Don't be afraid, I'm here." Miu-Chu knew that Chi-Chi was still thinking about returning to her own world filled with the apocalypse virus. But Miu-Chu couldn't answer this question, because he didn't know whether the world that Chi-Chi lived in existed or not. He didn't know that when he took off the power of the rat charm, whether Chi-Chi would return to the original world or turn back into that cold body again. Dull hand model. Miu-Chu also knew very well that the initial use of the power of the talisman to resurrect Zhu Qi was just a whim, but when he received the power of the king given to him by the void genome, he did not want to take back the power of the rat talisman. Retracting the spell means that Chi-Chi will turn back into a figure, and it also means that the last, void weapon, in the world will disappear. He needs the power of Chi-Chi. Miu-Chu believes that Chi-Chi will become the sharpest blade in his hand. After comforting Lu Chi, Miu-Chu slowly lay down on the bed and immediately closed her eyes. Soul out of body. In an instant, there was a gloomy wind. A group of souls invisible to ordinary people emerged from Miu-Chu's heavenly spirit, and gradually formed Miu-Chu's face on the ceiling. Miu-Chu's soul emerged and watched quietly as Chi-Chi climbed onto the bed next to Miu-Chu's body. Miu-Chu's clothes were lifted up, revealing the mark of the king, shining dimly on her chest. Chi-Chi crawled on Miu-Chu's chest, a pair of emerald white jade hands gently caressing the mark of the king on his chest, his eyes sparkling. After a while, Chi-Chi stepped away from Miu-Chu's bed and walked slowly to the bathroom nearby. As the bathroom door closed, Miu-Chu's soul also penetrated the floor and left. Miu-Chu was not worried that Chi-Chi would do something dangerous, to his body. After all, the body of an S-class zombie king was not something ordinary people could harm easily. Miu-Chu walked through the hotel room where she lived, and her soul came to the rooms of other survivors to explore one by one. The time now is only 10 o'clock in the evening, but the strange thing is that the survivors in the room are all lying on the bed, with their eyes closed, looking like they are fast asleep. Can't you tell that the people in this hotel are so healthy because there are no entertainment programs after the end of the world? Recalling the laughter in the hotel when I first arrived, the hotel at this time seemed like a ghost town, a forest of silence. The lights in the corridor had long been extinguished, no sound could be heard from the rooms on both sides, and an invisible breeze hung faintly in the air. The survivors' rooms were all silent, so quiet that even the sound of breathing had disappeared. Miu-Chu had a vague feeling that the souls of the survivors here seemed to have been manipulated. And when passing by a room, Miu-Chu discovered some terrifying clues. The owner of the room was sleeping soundly, and on the table next to him was a plate of unfinished food. The most surprising thing is that the food on the table is not the high-grade steak that Miu-Chu had eaten for dinner, but a ball of purple steamed buns that are covered with maggots and have long been rotten and moldy. Looking at the owner of the room, he was lying on the bed with a warm and sweet smile, but there were leftover food residues at the corners of his mouth, as if he had eaten some delicacy in the world, and the residue was even covered with disgusting flies. Is this what the hotel provides to survivors? It's interesting. Miu-Chu thought for a while, and her soul suddenly arrived at a room on the second floor of the hotel. In the room, several women with beautiful faces were slumped on the floor, their faces haggard and dull. There were 2 men sitting on the bed in the room. They were also bloated. One of them was short and fat, with a cigarette hanging from his mouth. It was the hotel manager Sun Yu. The man next to Sun Yu had skin folds, was thin, was aging, and had a pair of huge ears hanging vertically from his shoulders. He was the hotel consultant who was called Mr. Hong, who sat next to Sun Yu before. Sun Yu didn't even look at the women lying limply on the ground. He picked up a towel and wiped the sweat caused by strenuous exercise, and said to advisor Hong, "Then the search team from Yuhai is not honest." Consultant Hong replied with an old voice, "I didn't hear any movement from their room. It should be relatively peaceful. After all, our hotel is not a vegetarian. On the contrary, that boy Adong wanted to play some tricks today and almost told them our secret." Sun Yu said in a deep voice, "HMPH, if he really dares to tell us about us, then he himself will be finished. Let's talk about which of these bad things in the hotel has he done less. The boy named Song has already planned to stay. I originally wanted him to persuade the other members of the team to stay together, but it seems that there is no chance." Consultant Hong seemed to be very regretful. "Others don't matter, those 3 little girls must stay." The pot-bellied Sun Yu suddenly licked his dry lips, with a lustful look on his face. "Those 3 are all top-notch, such things are rare even before the end of the world." Consultant Hong, who had big earlobes, reminded, "This team is not easy to mess with. They are basically B-level players." Sun Yu sneered, "Of course I know this. Have you made sure that they all eat dinner?" Consultant Hong nodded and said, "Although we didn't eat much, everyone has eaten." Sun Yu nodded with satisfaction, casually picked up a woman on the ground, and started walking up and down with his big hands. "Those 3 little girls look like they are still babies. Hey, they are so tender. I will have to try them out. Boss Sun is really elegant, he is so good at playing." At this moment, a vague and hearty voice came from the air. "Who?" Sun Yu and advisor Hong suddenly woke up from their joy, and Sun Yu jumped out of bed. Looking around, he suddenly closed his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, an invisible spiritual wave burst out from the center of Sun Yu's eyebrows to all directions. At the same time, Consultant Hong also woke up with a start. As his pair of huge floppy ears swung, the rustling sounds in the surrounding environment turned into sound waves and reached the ears of the old man surnamed Hong. The mental fluctuations emitted by Sun Yu instantly shook the entire room. All the vases and utensils on the square table began to tremble, and the women who were originally paralyzed on the ground covered their ears in pain, rolled and wailed. But just when this large-scale spiritual impact was transmitted to somewhere near the wall, an even more unparalleled and powerful thought power turned into an invisible tentacle and collided with the spiritual impact. A look of horror appeared in Sun Yu's pupils. Before he could react, the residual power of 2 powerful mental shocks had already hit his face. A halo of light flashed in Sun Yu's eyes to resist, but he was still knocked back several steps by the impact, and his naked body fell on the bed. Unexpectedly, although Sun Yu had a bloated body, he was very flexible. He turned over and jumped up from the bed. But when he sensed it again, the owner of the telepathy disappeared out of thin air in the room. The person is missing. The old man surnamed Hong suddenly opened his eyes, his earlobes trembled, and came to the conclusion. Sun Yu's eyes flashed fiercely. It must be the search team from Yuhai. It seems they have begun to doubt us. Consultant Hong looked worried. Sun Yu looked at Consultant Hong and said, I originally wanted to wait until they left the hotel to clear up the suspicion, but it seems they are seeking their own death. After saying that, regardless of his naked body, Sun Yu closed his eyes again. This time, a circular light like a millstone was released from the center of Sun Yu's eyebrows, and immediately expanded and spread in a space of more than 100 square meters, and soon spread to the entire floor, and even the entire hotel. At the moment when the halo of the millstone enveloped the entire hotel, the eyes of countless pairs of survivors lying on the bed suddenly opened at the same moment. These eyes may be big or small, but the only thing they have in common is that they have a dull expression, and their eyes are empty, as if they are puppets at the mercy of others. On both sides of the dim corridor, the originally closed doors opened with a bang, and zombie-like figures walked out of the room one after another, slowly walking toward a room on the 3rd floor with pairs of empty and deep eyes. There was a fierce knock on the door, and the fat man stepped forward to open the door while breathing impatiently, muttering, "Who is it? You don't ask anyone to stop in the middle of the night." As soon as the door crack opened, a cold light suddenly passed through the door, directly punching a hole in the wooden door. The fat man was shocked, and then he realized that what penetrated the door was a kitchen knife used to kill pigs. "Screw you." The fat man kicked down the door and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Old Chen, old Song, get up, something is wrong with this hotel." Chen Liu and Song Kongwa were obviously old martial arts veterans. They woke up from their sleep almost instantly when they heard the fat man's cry. When they stood up, they saw a scene that shocked them inexplicably. The 3 of them saw figures in different costumes walking in from the broken door. These people are actually survivors living in the hotel. Their steps are slow, their expressions are dull, and their eyes are extremely empty. Apart from their relatively clean clothes, they are almost the same as the walking zombies in the outside world. These survivors were holding kitchen knives, hammers and other tools in their hands, with an icy cold light flashing in the darkness, and with saliva in their mouths, staggering towards the 3 fat men. "Let's go." Several people had just woken up from their sleep, but they also knew that they were in danger at this moment. Chen Liu immediately used a blue barrier to cover the 3 of them. Fatty and Song Kongwa signaled, and they also used their own powers to repel the approaching survivors. The 3 of them didn't know the situation clearly, so they naturally didn't dare to attack too hard. Fortunately, these survivors were just ordinary people, and after a lot of effort, they finally got out of the room. Rushing into the dim corridor, the 3 of them discovered that outside the room not far away, a ball of ice wrapped in survivors stood in front of the door. Mu Chu and Wei Linger also encountered crazy survivors. The survivors who had just repelled a group of attacks saw the 3 fat men breaking out of the door. In the distance, survivors kept coming towards us with weapons in their hands. The team looked at each other, gathered together as if they had a clear understanding, and rushed towards the hall downstairs. "What the hell is going on?" Fatty exclaimed. "They are obviously being controlled, don't kill them." A certain Madonna noticed the clues and stopped them. Chi still didn't understand the situation. Under the protection of several members of the team, he grabbed Mu Chu's clothes with a confused look on his face. In this way, the team defeated the survivors who were blocking the way, and finally arrived at the empty and deep hotel lobby. At this moment, the lights in the lobby suddenly turned on, illuminating the hotel that seemed a bit dark and scary in the dark night. Pa bang bang. As expected, we are indeed an elite team that came out of the Yuhai safety zone. This little trick can't do anything to you. Sun Yu clapped his hands and walked out of the corner of the hall, accompanied by more than a dozen awakened people with supernatural powers. "Did you do all this?" Wei Linger asked. Sun Yu was wearing a suit and still looked like a big boss, but his face had long lost its previous seriousness. He said with a sinister smile, "Yes, it's me. I have worked so hard to create such a huge foundation in this apocalyptic world, how could it be destroyed by you so easily? Originally I wanted to keep you alive for a while, but who knew you were seeking death yourself? Then you can't blame others. What's going on?" Fatty didn't know why. At this time, Mu Chu stepped forward, looked at Sun Yu and said, "If I guess correctly, this hotel should not be your property." Sun Yu's face originally looked like he was confident of winning, but when he heard Mu Chu's words, he was immediately stunned. "And your superpower is not mental relaxation, it should be mental hypnosis, right? And those survivors did not live a satisfying life. They were just hypnotized by you and fell into the hallucinations you created. They are just puppets under your enslavement." Mu Chu narrowed her eyes slightly, with a calm expression on her face. Sun Yu looked at Mu Chu, with a hint of shock in his pupils. He did not expect that the young man in front of him could analyze the truth so thoroughly. Immediately, the expression on his face returned to normal, and he smiled and said, "Yes, this hotel is not mine in the first place, but so what? Its original owner has long since gone to hell. Now, both this hotel and the people inside are my property." Sun Yu's face showed a look of morbid intoxication, and he suddenly looked at Wei Ling and the girls. "Of course, that includes you now. After the end of the world, there were many survivors who desperately wanted to resist me, but without exception they all died. Now this hotel still belongs to me. Madman, I think he is really crazy." The fat man looked at Sun Yu, who was roaring like a madman and couldn't help but cursed angrily. The other people in the team also looked at each other, and they all roughly understood what happened at this moment. Lu Qingfei sighed softly. She never expected that the hotel owner she admired turned out to be a cruel demon who enslaved the survivors behind her back. The remaining people were also greatly amazed, but they did not face the horror of life and death crisis. Although there are many awakened ones behind Sun Yu, most of the supernatural energy they emit is C level or D level. Only the 2 security guards who brought them here managed to reach Class B, but they were far from the veterans like them who had been in Class B Dangfang. The people here, including Sun Yu, the hotel owner, are a little more difficult to deal with, but they are still within their tolerance. However, Song Konghua's body trembled slightly and his eyes were inexplicable. He found a familiar figure with one arm among the dozen awakened people behind Sun Yu, a dong. "Old man, what gave you the courage to deal with us?" When the fat man saw that the people on the other side were just a group of old, weak, sick and disabled weaklings, he unconsciously gained confidence in his heart and cursed angrily with his chest puffed out. "Just because of those weaklings behind you." Sun Yu had already expected this, with a calculating light flashing in his eyes, and he looked at the old man with lop-eared ears next to him. Consultant Hong nodded and took out a thumb-sized perfume bottle from his pocket. Consultant Hong pulled out the cork, and instantly a faint fragrance floated in the air to everyone. "Careful." Chen Liu immediately set up a barrier, but the strange fragrance penetrated the barrier in an instant. Suddenly, everyone smelled an indescribable fragrance. "No, hold your breath." The team members hurriedly pinched their noses, but it was obviously too late. Everyone almost felt that the supernatural energy in their bodies was being sucked out and swallowed by an invisible force. The supernatural power was instantly suppressed and could not be lifted at all. And the awakened mutants like Wei Ling and Song Konghua were paralyzed on the ground limply. Due to the lack of support from the supernatural energy, the transformation state was directly released. "I have laid the eggs of the soul-eating butterfly in your dinner a long time ago. This kind of larval toxin will not occur in ordinary people's bodies, but when it encounters this unique pollen, it will grow crazily and devour it crazily in the body. The host's supernatural energy. If an ordinary person is entangled by the soul-eating butterfly larva, they will explode and die, but the supernatural energy of the awakened person will instantly become the nutrition for the powerful soul-eating butterfly larva." Sun Yu suddenly looked up to the sky and laughed. Looking at the weak team, everyone seemed to have seen some big joke. "A bunch of idiots, this is the price of stupidity and naivety." "How is that possible?" Shu Wen looked at the brown-haired squirrel on her shoulder with disbelief. "Guago has obviously verified it before eating." The larvae of the soul-eating butterfly only have a restraining effect on human awakeners, and ordinary animals and beasts cannot detect it. Chen Liu seemed a little powerless when he spoke, and he was obviously trying his best to resist the erosion of the soul-eating butterfly larva. This feeling actually seemed to be diluting their bone marrow. While the supernatural energy was being extracted, their bodies were also suffering from heartbreaking pain. Oh, little bug. Mu Chu quietly felt that a lively, little bug was emerging from the cocoon in his body, and he was so excited that he wanted to suck the supernatural power in Mu Chu's body. But just as a ray of light red supernatural energy was sucked into the body of the larva, this soul-eating butterfly larva, which had a powerful effect on the awakened, exploded and died in an instant. How strong is the supernatural energy in a terrifying heretic that has reached the level of destruction? Even a tiny bit of the terrifying power that can destroy the world cannot be resisted by a newborn insect. All the team members couldn't bear the double erosion of their bodies and supernatural energy, and fell to their knees in pain. Fatty couldn't help but howl. Chi-Chi, who didn't have strong supernatural energy, even trembled and collapsed to the ground. Haha, I can't tell that you are quite capable. Sun Yu saw that only Mu Chu in the team was still standing upright on the ground. He thought Mu Chu was holding on without falling due to her strong perseverance, and couldn't help but be surprised. Then he said proudly, I have blocked the signals within a 5-kilometer radius. You guys who want to move reinforcements are just wishful thinking. If any of you choose to join us now, I might consider letting you live. The old man surnamed Hong also consoled him and said, those who know the current affairs are heroes. You are still very young, so why bother with your own life? At this time, Song Konghua's friend named Adong also stood up and advised, Konghua, don't force yourself, join our hotel, the manager treats us awakened people very well. Song Konghua could not even lift his head at this time, veins popped up on his forehead, and there were large beads of sweat rolling on his face. He raised his head and glanced at Adong with an inexplicable look in his eyes. Before Song Konghua could say anything, Mu Chu, who had been standing still, laughed softly. Interesting, that's why I followed them here. Sun Yu looked confused. Could this kid be crazy? Just to meet interesting people like you. In other words, funny fool. Next, a scene that surprised everyone present appeared. Mu Chu actually walked to the side of Chi-Chi, who was in the most serious condition, as if taking a normal stroll. How is it possible? This kid is not poisoned. Sun Yu's face was full of horror, but what happened next shocked him even more. Mu Chu was seen squatting down, and the gentleman's palm gently caressed Lu Chi's cheek. Immediately, a white halo appeared in the palm of his hand, slowly pouring into the girl's chest. Ah! Chi-Chi groaned softly, and immediately felt that the severe pain in his body was gradually disappearing. After just a few breaths passed, the girl stood up with Mu Chu's help. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Mu Chu, and the whole audience was shocked. Cure all diseases, horse charm. Everyone present felt inexplicably horrified as they watched Chi-Chi's body recover rapidly under the treatment of White Halo. A healing power. Mu Chu, isn't he an awakener of the elemental system? The fat man's eyes widened, and he looked at the scene in front of him in confusion, and his words were a little awkward. Immediately afterwards, Mu Chu walked up to Wei Linger and Lu Qingfei, and released a white halo from the same hand, hitting their chests. In an instant, both women felt that the superpower flowing through their bodies slowed down instantly, and even the severe pain in their bodies also eased a lot. It seems that little brother Mu has hidden a lot of things from us. Chen Liu discovered the clue at this time and said with emotion, I didn't expect that little brother Mu turned out to be an awakened person with twin powers. Twins with superpowers. As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes changed when they looked at Mu Chu. As the name suggests, twins are powerful awakened people who are gifted with two kinds of powers. If the probability of an awakened person appearing among ordinary people is that 1 in 1,000 people may appear, then even if it is 100,000 or even 1 million people, there may be a twin with supernatural powers. Quickly, stop him quickly. Although Sun Yu didn't understand why Mu Chu was okay, he also knew that he couldn't sit still and wait for death, so he quickly ordered his men to take action. I saw several men behind Sun Yu quickly taking out pistols from their waists, and with a bang sound, the trigger was pulled. Sparks flew everywhere, and countless bullets were sprayed in the direction of Mewtwo. Mewtwo released a halo from his palms and stood in front of the two women, but ignored the bullets that were fired directly at him from behind. Just when countless bullets shining coldly under the light were about to hit Mewtwo, a huge ice wall rose from the ground. The bullets hit the ice wall and spattered countless sparks, but none of them hit Mewtwo. On Chu's body. Hey, give them all to me. Seeing that the bullets were ineffective against Mewtwo, Sun Yu immediately ordered the awakened people behind him to rush in the direction of Mewtwo and others. Under Mewtwo's treatment, Lu Qingfei quickly stood up, but Wei Ling still looked exhausted, obviously losing her ability to fight. Lu Qingfei looked at Mewtwo in surprise, but the latter smiled calmly. With your ability, you should be able to heal other people, right? My holy mother. As for these people, Mewtwo turned around and looked at the strange-looking survivors attacking her, and raised the corners of her mouth. Just let me play with them. Mewtwo put her hands in her pockets and walked slowly towards the dozens of figures. Behind them were the members of the search team who were infected by poisonous insects and unable to fight. Judging from his appearance, it seems that what he is about to experience is just a walk after dinner. No one expected that the one who stood up to protect their team at the critical moment would be Mewtwo, the newcomer of the team who was just starting out. A humanoid monster with a deformed face and two horns came straight towards Mewtwo. Mewtwo's eyes were slightly narrowed, with a smile at the corner of her eyes. A few strands of hair were swaying on her forehead. Densely dense ice picks appeared in front of her, stabbing towards the two-horned monster as fast as thunder. The body of the two-horned monster was instantly stabbed with bloody holes by ice picks. This is not over yet. Dozens of ice picks penetrated the two-horned monster and simultaneously assassinated several awakened ones behind him like a rainstorm of pear blossoms. And as Mewtwo walked forward slowly, stretching out his arms and hands, and spreading them out, in the mist of ice, a crystal blue ice spear suddenly appeared in Mewtwo's hand. The moment the 2B-class awakened security guards rushed towards Mewtwo, they suddenly expanded in size, and when their clothes were torn apart, they transformed into a humanoid hound with ferocious fangs and a huge black bear respectively. Mewtwo waved the ice spear in his hand, and a 3-foot radius was instantly filled with magnificent ice blue gun flowers. While he deflected a bunch of bullets fired at him, the black bear rushed towards him. The huge black bear was instantly stabbed and bruised by the gunfire, and its body was covered with ferocious traces of blood. The crystal blue light flashed across the sky like a crescent moon. Before he could counterattack, the tip of Mewtwo's spear had pierced his head. The huge body crashed to the ground, red blood splashed into the sky, and instantly dyed the chandelier above the hotel red. Under the light, the entire hall seemed to be stained with a touch of red. At this moment, the humanoid hound opened its sharp claws and attacked Mewtwo's back. Mewtwo thrust the cold spear in her hand into the ground, and instantly the ground beneath her feet cracked like a spider web. When the crack spread to the feet of the humanoid hound, a huge icicle rose from the ground, and the humanoid hound was directly frozen in the icicle. Without even looking at it, Mewtwo raised her hand and stabbed the cold spear back. The huge icicle wrapped around the person inside and instantly shattered into dregs. At the same time, a pair of wings appeared from the back of an awakened person. He held a rifle and started shooting at Mewtwo wildly. The awakened person thought he had seen through Mewtwo's path, and flapped his wings and flew directly to the highest ceiling of the wine hall. From this distance, he could easily dodge even if Mewtwo released the densely packed ice cones. It depends on how you hit me at this distance. The awakened one snorted coldly and launched a powerful offensive against Mewtwo calmly. But the next second, the awakened person with bird wings on his back was stunned. Mewtwo calmly formed a wall of ice to block the birdman's first round of bullets. Then he lifted his steps slightly, and a piece of ice appeared floating in the air under his feet. It could only hold one of Mewtwo's feet. But just like that, Mewtwo stepped on the ice with one foot, and another piece of ice condensed above it. Just like that, a staircase formed by the ice seemed to condense in the air. Mewtwo walked quickly, holding a cold spear in hand and walking straight towards the birdman on the magnificent ice blue stairs. In a few breaths, Mewtwo had already reached the top. The birdman was so frightened that he fluttered his wings and was about to retreat. But how could Mewtwo give him this opportunity? She clenched the spear in her hand and threw it violently. The lightning had already penetrated the birdman's shoulder, and the powerful momentum directly pinned the birdman to the thick wall in the center of the hall. On the pillar. Birdman's eyes were filled with shock and fear. He never expected that this man could be so terrifying. Chu slowly stepped in front of the birdman, the expression on his face was extremely indifferent. Then, he stretched out a finger. Save, save. But before he could finish speaking, a slender ice needle instantly pierced the center of his eyebrow. Gulu. The fat man looked at Chu, who was still looking calm even though he was fighting 1 against 10 in the distance, and swallowed hard. Chu, is he so strong? Chen Liu looked at Chu, who was killing everyone effortlessly, with a solemn look on his face. This level of supernatural energy no longer belongs to the B-level category. A level. I suspect that Chu has reached the A-level level. What? As soon as this statement came out, it immediately shocked everyone's attention. Twin superpowers, A-level awakened people, elemental superpowers, healing superpowers, how much does Chu hide? The fat man scratched his head in defeat. It was the first time he was so frustrated in front of a newcomer, Chu. Compared with Chu, they were like mayflies in the sewer. Song Kongwa also had a dull look on his face. Thinking of the disdain and ridicule he had directed at Chu before setting off, Xiao, who had always been arrogant, couldn't help but feel his face numb. Chen Liu looked at the tall figure of Chu in front of him and said solemnly, if this continues, maybe Chu will really grow into a thunder god and become the 4th guardian of our Yuhai base. Thor. Upon hearing this name, everyone's hearts sank. This is the guardian of another survivor base, and a powerful existence that single-handedly protects a city. The survivors of the base admired and worshipped him, and countless heretics were intimidated by his powerful methods and were intimidated by him. And he is an awakener of twin powers. At this time, concubine Lu Qing had also forced out the soul-eating butterfly larva from Song Konghua's body. At this point, all the team members had been cured. But because the soul-eating insects have eroded all the supernatural energy in their bodies, there is very little combat power left. Chu slowly retracted her gaze from the birdman corpse on the pillar, and turned to look at a figure not far away. This figure had a mutilated left arm and was thin. He was holding a dagger at Chu and his body was trembling. You, don't come over. This person is none other than Song Konghua's best friend, the one-armed boy Adong. Chu walked over, her expression unprecedentedly indifferent. Song Konghua shouted anxiously from a distance, Chu, spare Adong's life. As Chu approached, Adong's face turned pale with fright, and he trembled and knelt down on the ground, and the dagger in his hand fell to the ground. But at this moment, Sun Yu, the owner of the hotel in the distance, cursed loudly, Adong, don't forget that you have done the same thing to us. If you are caught, you will have no chance of survival. Quote. Chu's eyes were attracted by Sun Yu, but at this moment, Adong's eyes suddenly became fierce. I'm sorry, I can't look back. Adong jumped up hoarse, and his remaining right arm suddenly swelled in the air. It was covered with hard and sharp scales, and his fist like a bucket hit Chu's temple. Adong's punch gathered all the strength of his body, and his attack was unparalleled. His eyes were full of murderous intent, and he was sure to kill with one blow. Seeing Chu's eyes attracted by Sun Yu, he turned his head, but his fist was no longer close to the vital point of Chu's head. Adong seems to have seen the dawn of hope. Kill him. As long as you kill him, everything will be restored to its original state. But the next moment, Adong Shiji's eyes suddenly solidified. Chu glanced at Adong, and once again condensed a cold spear in her hand, and swung it directly through his head. Why? Obviously only a little bit. Adong's eyes were full of emptiness, and his gaze was fixed on Chu's eyes. This man's eyes are so cold. That look was like looking at an animal about to be served to the dinner table. Adong's only remaining arm fell to the ground, lifeless. Adong, seeing the death of his friend helplessly, Song Kongwa rolled and crawled even though he was weak, struggled to run to Adong's body, and burst into tears. Chu, however, did not even look at the body lying on the ground, and moved toward the hotel owner Sun Yu in a daze. Sun Yu was shocked, and when he turned around, he saw that except for the old man surnamed Hong beside him, there was no other awakened person alive. Sun Yu compressed his supernatural powers to the extreme, and an extremely powerful mental wave hit Chu. But Mewtwo's figure only paused for a moment, as if the mental shock had no effect on him, and he ducked to Sun Yu's side. Sun Yu's jaw dropped in shock. Only he, who was also a spiritual awakener, could see that the moment the spiritual impact hit Mewtwo, several invisible spiritual tentacles popped up around Mewtwo, blocking his attack. Offset everything. No, you're not. Before Sun Yu could speak, Mewtwo with an inexplicable sly smile appeared in front of him. Immediately afterwards, a cold and biting feeling came from his chest. PFF'd. A large amount of blood flowed out from his chest. Sun Yu's fat body fell to the ground weakly, and blood was oozing out from his mouth. Sun Yu tried to pull out the ice gun stuck on his chest with trembling hands, but found that his body was getting weaker and weaker. What was even more frightening was that he felt that the essence, blood and supernatural energy in his body were flowing uncontrollably along the ice spear on his chest into the body of the young man in front of him. Sun Yu's figure instantly shriveled up, but under his loose clothes he looked inconspicuous. Until the end, Sun Yu could only helplessly feel the passage of life force and supernatural energy, while the corners of Mewtwo's mouth in front of him were rising more and more. It's like I got some satisfaction. I surrender, please spare me. My power can detect any sound within a few kilometers, and no sound can escape my ears. As long as you spare me, I can help you find out a lot of important information. Consultant Hong on the side saw Sun Yu falling under Mewtwo's cold spear. He knew that he was no match at his age, so he knelt down on the ground and begged for his life. His superpowers play a huge role in spying and gathering information. He believes that no matter which force it is, it will not reject such a well-informed intelligence officer. But Mewtwo's approach made his plan fail again. Mewtwo felt the spiritual energy flowing into her body and couldn't help laughing. Then she saw Consultant Hong kneeling on the ground and kowtowing. Mewtwo pulled out the cold spear and shot it directly through the old man's heart. He also said something that puzzled Consultant Hong. I'm not interested in getting such an ability yet. After all, the unknown road ahead is the adventure I want. In the early morning, the first ray of sunlight shines into the hotel through the glass windows, illuminating the lobby. The originally empty hall was now filled with people. At a glance, there were over 100 people. However, most of these survivors had dull eyes, sitting on the ground in a daze, salivating at the corners of their mouths, and from time to time there were a few giggles from the crowd. Looking at the appearance of this group of people, they seem to be immersed in a dream composed of illusions and cannot extricate themselves. Wei Linger stood in front of the hall. There was still a large amount of blood on the ground not far away, which showed how fierce the battle last night was. Boss. The fat man came running from a distance, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and said, the survivors in the hotel are all here now. Wei Linger nodded slightly and looked at concubine Lu Qing aside. However, concubine Lu Qing turned to look at the survivors sitting together in a row with their eyes blank, shaking her head and sighing. They have all been affected by Sun Yu's hypnotic backlash, and they need to return to the base to receive systematic treatment. Furthermore, the damage done to their spirits by Sun Yu is irreversible. Even after treatment, they may not be able to return to ordinary people's lives. Chen Weo also walked into the hall at this time. The signal jammer has been destroyed. Now we can inform the base of the situation here. Concubine Lu Qing asked doubtfully, where are the others? Song Kongwa went to bury his friend. As for Mewtwo and Chi-Chi, Wei Linger pursed her lips and pointed in the direction of the ceiling. They are on the top of the building. Wildflowers in full bloom. Please tell me, why do people hurt each other and fight with each other? A flower that blooms quietly. What can you see there? Why can't people forgive each other? Singing sounds like sounds of nature came from the rooftop. The ethereal and melodious voice is accompanied by the moving melody, which makes people wonder whether this is the sound of salvation from heaven. Dressed in an orange-red goldfish suit, Chi-Chi sat on the roof, holding her chin with a pair of jade-white hands. Her delicate face was unruffled, and her light red eyes stared blankly at the newborn horizon, but the singing voice coming out of her mouth was like as beautiful as the sounds of nature. To prove that I have survived, I sing loudly. For the nameless friend. Mewtwo lay flat on the eaves and looked up at the sky, quietly listening to the moving song sung by Chi-Chi. At this moment, even the rage in his heart was calmed down by the heavenly voice of Chi-Chi, and his body and mind relaxed, reaching an unprecedented state of calm. Autumn. At this time, Lu Qi suddenly mentioned Mu Chu. With a gentle smile on her lips, Mu Chu turned her head to look at Qi Qi. Why didn't you use my power last night? The girl's voice was still so pleasant and ethereal, and no emotion could be heard. Hearing this, Mu Chu stood up with a chuckle, her slender figure reflected on the eaves by the early morning sunlight. Mu Chu stretched out, stepped forward and hugged Lu Qi. The girl's fragrant body fragrance filled her heart and spleen. Mu Chu said in the girl's ear, "Occasionally I want to relax my muscles and vent my muscles, not to mention. They're not worthy enough for me to use your power." Mu Chu's soft voice reached Qi Qi's ears, and the girl nodded in confusion. She didn't know what Mu Chu's words meant, but she only knew that she could come forward at any time when Mu Chu needed her. This is the only thing that Qi Qi can do for Mu Chu, the creator. At this moment, the door leading to the roof opened. Lu Qingfei walked up from the escalator. Mu Chu. Concubine Lu Qing came over and frowned when she saw Mu Chu holding Qi Qi in her arms. She recalled the wanton bullying of women by the powerful awakened ones in the base. Concubine Lu Qing said to Mu Chu, "What happened last night is all thanks to you." Mu Chu smiled and said nothing. Concubine Lu Qing looked at Mu Chu's handsome face, and suddenly seemed hesitant to speak, but finally looked at Mu Chu and said, "Because of Adong's death, Kongwa is in a low mood. Adong was also forced by others. You could have done it last night." "You mean I shouldn't have killed Adong last night?" Mu Chu asked. Concubine Lu Qing was afraid that Mu Chu would misunderstand, so she quickly said, "That's not what I meant. What I meant is that we can choose other methods to punish Adong without directly taking his life." Mu Chu suddenly smiled meaningfully at Concubine Lu Qing and said, "My holy mother, have you misunderstood something?" Mu Chu's body suddenly moved closer to Concubine Lu Qing, and their faces were only inches apart. Mu Chu said, "The reason why I killed him was just because he was pointing a dagger at me. Anyone who holds a weapon against me will be my enemy, and my enemies will never have a way to survive. That's all." Looking at Mu Chu with a smile on her face, Lu Qingfei didn't know what to say for a moment. With a bang, Weilinger broke through the door and rushed to the rooftop. She asked in surprise, "Is the singing just now the voice of Qi Qi?" Just when a few people were still confused about the reason, they heard Weilinger continue. Those survivors gradually regained their consciousness after hearing Qi Qi's singing. Weilinger looked at the girl wearing an orange goldfish suit on the roof, her eyes full of surprise and eagerness. The Awakener. There is no doubt that Qi Qi is also an awakened person with supernatural powers. Weilinger led several people to the lobby of the hotel. I saw that the eyes of the originally unconscious survivors here gradually became focused. What's more, several strong young people have woken up and are kneeling at the fat man's feet, thanking him repeatedly. Mu Chu was also surprised at this time and looked at Qi Qi with interest. After Qi Qi came to this world, he also awakened supernatural powers. Thinking back again, Qi Qi awakened the minds of these survivors with his heavenly singing. It seems that his ability is also related to the spirit. Under everyone's surprised gazes, Qi Qi covered her chest and shook her head cutely. There was a strange feeling suddenly. After singing, the strange feeling disappeared. Everyone suddenly realized that the strange feeling in Qi Qi's mouth was the strange energy appearing on the body of the primary awakener. Judging from the reactions of these survivors, Qi Qi's ability should be similar to spiritual abilities that soothe the soul and eliminate negative effects. This type of supernatural ability is extremely rare even in Yuhai base. After returning home, maybe Qi Qi can join our medical team. Everyone except Mu Chu suddenly looked at Qi Qi solemnly. Others are also begging you. Until Qi Qi's heaven-like singing disappeared in the hall again, everyone still had an intoxicated expression on their faces. What a beautiful song. Why do I want to cry so much after hearing this? Wow, I miss my family. All the survivors and team members had tears in their eyes. They were all touched by Qi Qi's singing and recalled their former family, lovers and friends. And Mu Chu was looking at Qi Qi quietly not far away. At this moment, he finally understood why even he, as the Fire Demon Lord, felt soothed when he heard the singing of Qi Qi. The first time I awaken, I am a Class B awakener. Perhaps because of the superimposed effect of the rat talisman, Qi Qi's abilities reached the B level once he awakened. A song that soothes the soul. This ability is really similar to this girl's personality. Chi-Chi's singing is like adding a purification buff to everyone, which can prevent and eliminate the negative effects on the spiritual level that everyone has suffered. Under the influence of the prayer songs, some of the survivors quickly regained their consciousness, but there were still a large number of survivors who were in a trance and had not fully woken up from their dreams. Chen Weo held a palm-sized communication device in his hand and said to everyone, "I have already explained the general situation here to the base. People from the guards will be coming to rescue them soon." Wei Linger nodded, her pretty face full of calmness. Obviously, this is also the best way to deal with it at present. After all, their team has other tasks and cannot stay here to take care of these survivors. Wei Linger took out the spherical space storage set and separated some of the grain stored in it to keep some. Instructing those who had regained consciousness to take care of the remaining survivors, the team members set off on their journey again. Before leaving, Song Konghua, who had been away for an unknown period of time, returned to the hotel to join everyone. This time, Song Konghua's face no longer had the arrogant look before, but the way Song Konghua looked at Mu Chu was a little weird. An A-level elemental awakener. This was something that no one had ever imagined before. The newcomer who still needs to be taken care of by the team members when leaving the base has become the highest combat power in the team. Even Song Konghua would not dare to provoke an A-level elemental awakener, even if the latter is only a thin line away from the A-level level. However, after this battle, not only did Mu Chu, a powerful A-level warrior, join the team, but they also had a new spiritual awakener named Chi-Chi, and everyone couldn't help but feel inspired. The next task is to leave the hotel, go to the border of Linan City to find Lu Qingfei's fiancé, explore the living resources and survivors along the way, and return to the base. This should have been the team's safest plan, but the moment everyone left the hotel, a device on Chen Weiguo's waist rang. Chen Weo frowned, picked up the positioning device on his waist and took a look, only to see a red dot on it flashing crazily not far from them. Chen Weiguo's face suddenly became ugly, and he showed a rare look of embarrassment. He looked at the crowd and said, "More than 20 kilometers away from us, a search team is in trouble and is now sending a signal to request our assistance." As soon as these words came out, the team became silent for an instant, with complex expressions on everyone's faces. Even concubine Lu Qing showed some hesitation. There is no other reason. In the ruins of this city where murderous intentions are hidden everywhere, there are too many dangerous places. You never know what monster will rush out of that corner in the next second. Even a search team feels that the existence of trouble must be extremely dangerous. They don't know if they go there to rescue or add unnecessary sacrifices. Moreover, the team of searchers in the ruins are not completely reliable. They have seen too many cases of cheating, annihilating, and stealing resources from a team of searchers, which makes them dare not lend a helping hand at will. There's no need for us to meddle in other people's business. It's better to leave here quickly, complete the mission, and return to Yuhai early than anything else. This was Song Konghua's answer. There were too many things about this mission that made him uncomfortable. Now he just wants to return to Yuhai base as soon as possible. Concubine Lu Qing thought for a moment and then sighed softly. If we can help, we should try our best to lend a helping hand. After all, there are fewer and fewer awakened people in the Jade Sea. With that said, concubine Lu Qing looked at Mu Chu, the only A-level awakener in the team. As the most powerful person in the team, he has the right to speak. Mu Chu noticed concubine Lu Qing's gaze and turned around as if she didn't care. "I can do it, you just decide." For Mu Chu, the unknown road ahead is the most interesting adventure. He was looking forward to meeting someone who could put pressure on him. Lu Qingfei looked hopefully at Wei Linger again. She was the captain of the entire team. Wei Linger gritted her silver teeth and said, "Forget it, forget it. Since Sister Qingfei said so, let's go over and have a look. At worst, if you encounter any danger, just run away." The fat man consoled him with a heartless look. "Boss, why are you panicking? We have Mu Chu, an A-level elemental awakener here. We will kill all zombie heretics. After we return to Yuhai, we can apply to become an A-level search team. Then the treatment will be, hee." Fatty started to make love. Indeed, with Mu Chu as an A-level awakener, Wei Linger's team can be upgraded to an A-level team. The treatment is several times higher than that of a B-level team. No wonder the fat man is so rude. Shu Wen rarely expressed her own opinions at this time. She held a palm-sized hamster in her arms and said tremblingly, I listen to Sister Ling. Chi tilted his head blankly, with the same indifferent attitude as Mu Chu. Seeing that the team members had already made up their minds, Chen Weio nodded. In that case, let's go back and drive over to check out what's going on. As soon as we find something is wrong, we will retreat immediately. Don't get into a meaningless fight. Compared with Wei Ling, Chen Weio is more like a team organizer. He is always able to come up with the safest plan at the moment of crisis. This is what Mu Chu admires most about him. A few hours later, two four-wheeled steel monsters armed almost to the teeth set off from the center of the block and rode towards a certain direction. Two off-road vehicles were racing in the wilderness under the scorching sun. This is a remote mine that has long been abandoned, and there are piles of ore and sand everywhere. But fortunately, it is located in a remote place and has sparse crowds. As a result, not many zombies and monsters appeared after the apocalypse broke out. Wherever the tires of the off-road vehicle passed, dust flew up, like a small sandstorm. I said, why did that team come to this shabby place? Is this a place where normal people come? The fat man looked at the haze-like smoke and sand in front of the windshield from the driver's seat and said angrily. The team spent most of the morning, speeding through the ruins of the city, and solved many mid to high-level heretics along the way, and finally arrived at the mine at noon. Chen Weiguo's voice came from the microphone in the car, the mine not far ahead as the destination displayed on the locator. At this point, everyone could only bite the bullet and walk through the surrounding sand and dust. The sun was high in the sky, and at noon, two armed steel off-road vehicles were speeding along the sand dunes of the mine. Finally, the two vehicles stopped in an empty mine pit. Not far away were several mining trucks such as forklifts and excavators. The fat man got off the car, breathed bitterly, looked at the empty mining area in front of him, and said angrily, "What's going on? Why is there no one there?" At this time, Chen Weio picked up the locator from his waist behind the fat man and carefully compared it with the red dot on the position. Immediately afterwards, Chen Weio walked to a forklift in front and finally found a transmitter the same size as a palm on the car seat. When Chen Weio saw this launcher, his expression immediately became embarrassed. He turned around and said to everyone, "No. This is probably a trap." Before he finished speaking, the ground where everyone was standing shook instantly. I saw two off-road vehicles as the center, and a huge fence surrounded by steel thorns rose up from the ground, with sharp thorns on it. By coincidence, the entire team was surrounded. Just when everyone was panicking, a ferocious laughter came from the mine not far away. "Mu Chu, how are you doing after I haven't seen you for a few days? I didn't die in the ruins. That's really, haha, what a pity." Mu Chu looked towards the location of the mine as if she had expected it, and the other members of the team also followed the sound. The mine was filled with sand and dust, and when the smoke dissipated, several strangely dressed figures suddenly appeared. A man with a mustache and a wretched appearance had a sneer on his face, looking at the crowd below like mice in a cage. Seeing this person, Mu Chu narrowed her eyes slightly, with no expression on her face. Wei Ling also recognized this figure and said coquettishly, "Ma Kun, what do you want to do?" When Ma Kun heard this, he looked at each other and laughed out loud. "What am I going to do? Isn't it obvious? Do you know that the crime of murdering the search team in the ruins has seriously violated Yuhai's law of order? If it spreads to the base, Yuhai will no longer have a place for you, and not even Wang Dapeng can protect you." With that said, Wei Ling quietly gestured to Chen Weio behind him, and Chen Weio immediately pulled out the transmitter from his waist. How could their little moves be hidden from Ma Kun and his team of keen awakeners? A red-haired man next to Ma Kun who was killing Matt flashed his eyes while playing with a flying knife. The flying knife in his hand seemed to have spirituality in his hand. He stretched out his hand and threw it, and the flying knife on his fingertips cut through the sky like an arm. A strong gust of wind carried the sharp blade directly through the cage. Chen Weio felt a lightness on his waist, followed by the sound of the dagger falling to the ground. When he lowered his head, he realized that the transmitter originally hanging around his waist had shattered to the ground. What a fast speed! Chen Weo had to admit that if that knife had been aimed at his vitals, he might have been dead by now. Zizhen, I advise you not to waste your efforts. The delaying strategy won't work here. Ma Kun shook his finger with a proud look on his face, and then said with a sinister smile, Mu Chu, when you offended me, did you ever think about this day? Standing next to Ma Kun was a tattooed man. Weird blue and black tattoos could be seen on his exposed skin, and the right half of his face was completely covered by tattoo marks. The tattooed man was a little impatient with Ma Kun's words, and frowned. What nonsense, get rid of them quickly, I only care about what treasures they carry. The tattooed man pressed his lips together, obviously coveting the resources that Mu Chu and his party had searched for along the way. A short man behind him looked at the three girls, Chi-Chi, Wailing Lu Qingfei, with a lewd look on his face, and his mouth was about to drool. I haven't seen any meat in a few days since I came out. Brother Hao, that girl from Wailing has decided that I can't touch her, but I have agreed first that concubine Lu Qing and that girl in red will have a taste first. The flying knife man who killed Matt turned his attention to the frightened Shu Wen. Then I want this, I like the tender ones. While several people were talking, there was suddenly a sound of heavy footsteps in the mine behind them. Everyone looked back and saw a tall, muscular man walking out of the shadows. The muscular man was holding a mutilated zombie in his hand. The zombie had its head drooped, blood was flowing all over its body, and it looked like it was no longer alive. The strong man was full of majestic blood, like a ferocious beast that was ready to attack. This muscular man made everyone realize that his strength definitely exceeded the B-level level just by showing off his powerful aura. Brother Shang. When several people saw this muscular man, they all looked in awe. Brother Shang casually threw the zombies aside, turned his head and glanced at the team in the steel cage, then walked aside indifferently. Hurry up and end it. Okay, Brother Shang. Ma Kun smiled flatteringly and looked at Mu Chu and his party again. I am only targeting Mu Chu this time. You can choose to leave here now and pretend that nothing happened. Otherwise. Ma Kun paused and his eyes suddenly became fierce. You will all be buried here today. When they suddenly heard this sentence, everyone was shocked and looked at each other in confusion. Guan Mukcho, on the other hand, was stroking Lu Qi's silky hair, looking calm and composed, as if everything that happened here had nothing to do with him. Ma Kun and the others just looked at the others on a rock above the mine, their eyes filled with the banter of a hunter looking at his prey in a cage. At this moment, Song Konghua, who had been silent all this time, finally couldn't hold himself back and suggested to everyone, let's get out of here. Song Konghua, what are you talking about? Do you want us to give up Mu Chu? Wailing looked at Song Konghua in disbelief. What else? Song Konghua stepped forward, his eyes full of resentment. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He pointed at Mu Chu and said, are we supposed to stay here and accompany him to death? Old Song, Mu Chu is our companion. Don't forget who saved us when we were in the hotel. The fat man looked at Song Konghua with anger in his eyes, as if he had just met the person in front of him. Chi-Chi still looked confused. She was a little tired of Song Konghua's irritability. Seeing that he could not persuade everyone, Song Konghua looked at concubine Lu Qing sincerely. Concubine Qing, they are all crazy, let's get out of here. Looking at Song Konghua with a flattering face in front of her, Lu Qingfei didn't know what to say for a moment. She has always treated Song Konghua as a younger brother, and she would forgive him even if he acted a little irritably sometimes. But this time, Lu Qingfei shook her head resolutely, and looked at Song Konghua with disappointment in her eyes. We are a team, how can we abandon our companions just because they are in danger? Doing this is different from those outside. What's the difference between zombies that eat human flesh? I want to stay and help Mu Chu. Lu Qingfei's righteous words were like a sharp knife piercing Song Konghua's heart. Song Konghua did not expect that concubine Lu Qing would reject him. Angrily, he pointed at Mu Chu and said, it's all because of you. If it weren't for you, Adong, he wouldn't have died. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't be in this situation. Mu Chu was dismissive of Song Konghua's words. He never cares about dead people. Song Konghua looked at the team again, only to find that the team members looked at him with ridicule, disgust, and indignation. Song Konghua's expression changed again, and he finally made a choice between life and death. He raised his hand and said to Ma Kun and others, You are targeting Mewtwo, right? I have no intention of going against you, please let me leave here. Ma Kun had a sinister smile on his face, nodded and looked at the short man behind him. The short man understood, and with a wave of his hand, a hole appeared in the steel fence next to Song Kong's incarnation, allowing only one person to pass through. Song Kongwa immediately rushed out from behind the fence and fled backwards without looking back. Traitor! The fat man sighed angrily, despising Song Konghua's behavior. I didn't expect that we would have such a white-eyed wolf in our team. But then, something unexpected happened. Not long after Song Kongwa ran out of the fence, a steel thorn suddenly appeared under his feet, instantly piercing the soles of his feet. Song Kongwa stumbled and fell to the ground, but another flying knife passed through the air, piercing his thigh and pinning him to the ground. When Ma Kun and the others saw this scene, they started laughing crazily. Idiot! Ha ha ha! The man with the killer haircut was laughing with a throwing knife in his hand. It was he who had just nailed Song Kongwa to the ground. How can I let you go at this juncture? Are you going to tell me something? You have offended our Shenglong society, and can you still live in peace? As soon as these words came out, Ma Kun and the others laughed wildly again, and tears even came from the corners of their eyes. The words about letting them go just now were just to see the embarrassment of Mewtwo and his group's internal strife. From the beginning to the end, they had no intention of letting any of them go. If their behavior is known to Yuhai base, the law enforcement team will definitely not let them go. The team looked at Song Konghua's miserable appearance as he fell to the ground and howled. No one felt sorry for the traitor. But everyone also felt sad for a while. After all, they were facing a greater danger. That's the Flesh King Kong Jin Shang. Chen Weo looked at the muscular man sitting high on the rock with a look of vigilance and fear in his eyes. He is a veteran A-level awakener in the base. He is so powerful that he has few opponents even among A-level awakeners. He is also Wang Dapeng's most capable general. I didn't expect that Ma Kun would even invite him this time. I'm afraid we will have a fierce battle this time. Chen Weo looked at the other people around Ma Kun and found that they were all tough characters, and he couldn't help but feel more distressed. A veteran A-level awakener, I wonder if Mewtwo is his opponent. Fatty also lost confidence after hearing Chen Weiguo's words and looked nervous. Weilinger had also transformed into the form of a cat lady at this time, with a pair of sharp claws flashing with cold light. How do you know if you haven't fought? There are so many of us here, but we are afraid of just 5 of them. Shu Wen did not show any timidity at this time and patted the brown squirrel on her shoulder. Guago. The squirrel jumped to the ground quickly, shook off its hair a few times, and then began to expand rapidly. In the blink of an eye, the palm-sized squirrel had grown into a huge red-eyed monster with protruding hair, like a jungle beast. Fatty looked at Shu Wen, the youngest, and plucked up his courage. He couldn't be afraid at this time. Swallowing his saliva, he stepped forward and said forcefully, I'm not afraid of you. Don't think that you 5 can defeat us. Who said we were going to fight you? When Ma Kun heard this, his eyes flashed, and the joking smile on his face grew wider. I saw him casually taking out a remote control and slowly pressing a button. Everyone in the steel fence instantly felt the ground shaking. There was a click, dust flew into the sky, and the steel gate of a mine in front of everyone suddenly opened. A beast-like roar came from inside instantly, and pairs of red bloodshot eyes glared angrily from the dark shadows. The sun shone into the cave entrance, and huge figures were seen walking out. These figures have strange shapes and vary in size. Some are shaped like cockroaches, but are as huge as tigers. Some clearly look like dogs, but have 2 heads, ferocious faces and sharp teeth, and some are shaped like humans. There are standing and walking mantises, even huge wild boars, groups of zombies, mutated zombies. But without exception, these monsters roared with hunger, and their eyes were filled with bloodthirsty light. When counted, there were dozens of these heretics. These are the heretics we have worked hard to capture these days. The searcher team accidentally entered the heretics' lair, and after a fierce battle, they were all buried in the belly of zombies. They became the unknown heroes who sacrificed their lives during the construction of the Yuhai base. What do you think of this reason? Ma Kun smiled evilly and looked at the roaring heretics. Enjoy it. This is a banquet I specially prepared for you. The fat man stared blankly at the group of monsters rushing towards him, His legs and feet were shaking unconsciously, and he murmured, "It's over, it's really over now. There are dozens of B-level heretics, and a few of them have reached A-level supernatural energy." Chen Weiguo's face was as solemn as ever. Even he had never faced such a large number of high-level heretics. This was the most dangerous time he had been searching for ruins for so long. "I'm afraid it's going to be really troublesome this time." Chen Weiguo looked at the crowd and said with a wry smile. "Mu Chu, I'm looking forward to it. What should you do now?" Groups of zombie monsters were attacking the cage where Mu Chu and others were, with pairs of scarlet bloodthirsty eyes showing a desire for naked flesh and blood. The fat man held a machete in his hand and started slashing at the steel fence behind him crazily, trying to open a way out. But this was of course in vain. The machete had already made a gap, but the fence was not moved at all. But at this moment, the fence in front of everyone disappeared underground with a bang, and the empty door in front of everyone opened wide, welcoming the arrival of the beast-like fish on a chopping board. Ma Kun looked at the team with a sneer on his face. At this moment, he did not forget to mock Mu Chu and said with a smile, "Mu Chu, if you kneel down and kowtow 10 times for me now, I might be able to let you go." Mu Chu looked up and saw Ma Kun and his group standing on the mine with wild smiles. Not far ahead were hordes of monster heretics, rushing towards Mu Chu and the Blood Eaters. Suddenly, Mu Chu also chuckled. The sound was not loud, but when it reached the ears of Ma Kun and others, it was extremely mocking. "This kid is so stubborn even when he is about to die." The short man behind Ma Kun grinned and said, "I'm really looking forward to what his expression will be before he dies. It will definitely be exciting. Hey Mu Chu, tell me if you have any ideas, our lives are almost gone." The fat man who cherished his life was the most anxious. He had never seen such a terrifying number of high-level zombies in his life, let alone being in a cage and unable to escape even if he wanted to. What to do? There was a smile on Mu Chu's face, but she walked forward. Mu Chu was seen walking slowly to the fence surrounded by steel thorns, where an opening was opened for only one person to pass. Mu Chu played with the wind with her right hand, and mist filled the air. A tang sword made of ice appeared out of thin air. Holding the tang dao with her backhand, the tang dao made of ice got stuck on the steel fence. Immediately, Mu Chu touched it with her elbow, and the huge force from her wrist instantly acted on the fence through the ice knife. There was just a click sound, and the iron fence cracked like a spider web in an instant. The fence that the fat man had just failed to split with all his strength was now directly broken open by brute force to create a big hole. "It's just fighting." Mu Chu looked at the rushing corpses, raised her right arm with some excitement and licked her lips, a trace of reminiscence flashed in her eyes. Once upon a time, as the lord of the fire demon who terrorized a territory, he led such a group of subordinates to gallop through the ruins. Thousands of zombies surrendered, and all heretical monsters bowed their heads wherever he passed. "I'll wipe it." The fat man jumped up in shock at this moment. "You have such a method, why didn't you just use it to escape?" But Mu Chu seemed to have never heard of it. A rare and arrogant smile appeared on his face, a flash of red flashed in his eyes, and with the dust flying, Mu Chu rushed directly towards the group of corpses in a few steps. "Crazy, really crazy." Fatty scratched his hair fiercely, wanting to cry over Mu Chu's death-seeking behavior. "We can't let Mu Chu go up alone." Wei Ling'er reacted and followed Mu Chu with Shu Wen's crazy squirrel to greet him. The fat man's shoulders sank and he turned his head in panic. He saw Chen Weiguo holding a rifle on his shoulder and patted the fat man's shoulder. Then he smiled honestly. "Xiao Zhu, if we can still survive after this, we must have a good drink. If I die, remember to take good care of your sister-in-law and my daughter when you go back." Seeing the people in the team following Mu Chu, the fat man shook his head. "I think you are all crazy." But the steps under his feet also became faster. "I'm crazy too, forget it, at least it proves that I didn't come to this world in vain." Concubine Lu Qing looked at Shu Wen standing aside and said, "Wenwen, how are you?" Shu Wen's little face turned red from suppressing it. After a while, she breathed out softly, "No, their emotions are too violent. I can't communicate at all." Concubine Lu Qing held the hands of Chi-Chi and Shu Wen and stayed quietly behind everyone. Their abilities were more auxiliary and they couldn't do much at the moment. The only thing they could do was to pray feebly. I pray that we can win this battle with a huge disparity in strength. Mewtwo. Lu Qingfei's pretty face was full of worry. As soon as Mewtwo rushed out, he ran as fast as thunder, wearing a black windbreaker catching the wind under his rapid attack. The zombie swarm and the terrifying lineup of alien beasts shook the mining area, causing dust to fly. Under the haze were pairs of ferocious and bloodthirsty scarlet eyes. But Mewtwo was not afraid. The black figure cut through the sky and galloped on the horizontal plane. Holding the crystal blue tang knife in his hand, he rushed into the corpse group like thunder and lightning. Several zombies went crazy and bit at Mewtwo with their mouths wide open. The crystal blue tang knife cut through the sky. The blade was extremely sharp. When Mewtwo waved it, it was like the scythe of death. In an instant, it penetrated the necks of several zombies, and several ferocious zombie heads were instantly thrown into the air. Accompanied by Mewtwo's magnificent blue blade and splashing blood, it seemed as if a rain curtain of ice and fire was woven into the sky, spreading over this extreme battlefield between humans and zombies. This scene greatly inspired the team members. Immediately after Mewtwo, Wailinger and others rushed into the group of corpses and tried their best to surround and suppress these irrational and terrifying monsters with bloodthirsty eyes. At this moment, two fierce sword lights struck Mewtwo's chest. Quick, allow, ruthless. The posture seemed to be the most primitive beast hunting, and it was about to tear Mewtwo's chest directly open. Mewtwo seemed to feel something. She raised her arm and held the Tang Dao horizontally in front of her chest. The sound of ping made a strong sound of gold and iron clashing. Immediately, Mewtwo stabilized his figure, and saw a mantis monster in front of him, as tall as an adult, blocking his way. This cockroach has a wide body and a strong body, and its whole body is a strange dark red color. There are two bright serrated swords on its forelimbs, which are shining with a dazzling cold light at the moment. The giant mantis failed in its first attack, and flew into the air without stopping at all, wielding its serrated swords and attacking Mewtwo again. The target this time is Mewtwo's Tianling headgear. At the same time, a huge buzzing sound came, and a huge flying cockroach was seen swooping down from behind Mewtwo with its bloated body dancing. The cockroach was huge, its wings and tentacles were surging at the same time, and the tentacles all over its body were exerting force. It opened its ferocious mouthparts with explosive force and bit towards Mewtwo, as if it wanted to swallow Mewtwo in one bite. In an instant, he was attacked from both sides. Chapter 51. A cold light flashed in Mewtwo's eyes, and her left hand moved in the air. The dense frost condensed into a long knife in an instant. Mewtwo bent her knees and squatted slightly, exerting force with her right arm. The crystal blue blade collided with the mantis's serrated double blades. The mantis's double blades were directly blocked by Mewtwo's sword, unable to make an inch. At the same time, Mewtwo held the condensed ice sword with her backhand. The blade turned out and pressed against her arm. Her elbows collided backwards, and the sharp edge of the long blade penetrated directly into the mouthparts of the giant cockroach behind her. The giant cockroach roared violently, and dark green fishy liquid splashed out from its mouthparts, dripping on the ground. Even the sand was corroded and huge holes were formed. Mewtwo clenched the Tang Dao with her right hand, and a huge force shook out from the Tang Dao. The giant mantis was knocked backwards by the huge force, and its limbs became unstable and fell into the sand pit. As Mewtwo turned around, the long knife was pulled out from the giant cockroach's mouth. At this moment, a ferocious two-headed hound knocked away the group of corpses, roaring and biting in the direction of Mewtwo. Mewtwo snorted coldly and jumped up into the air. The ice surface immediately rose under his feet, and a spear condensed in Mewtwo's hand. Mewtwo violently threw it, and the ice spear flickered in the air, pinning the giant cockroach to the sand. The two-headed hound that pounced from the side saw the blow stuck in the air. It looked up at Mewtwo and roared, with a violent look in its eyes. At this moment, Mewtwo was standing quietly in the air, with the roaring corpses at her feet, like a peerless war god looking down on all living beings. Fight against 3A-level heretics with your own strength. Everyone present was shocked by Mewtwo's heroic performance, and their eyes were full of disbelief. Mewtwo, didn't he just advance to the A level? Fatty couldn't believe that what he saw in front of him was what a fledgling, novice, could do. Could this be the talent of the top awakener of the elemental system? It's so terrifying. Chen Weo erected a barrier in front of him to block the attacking zombies. He held a rifle in his hand and fired violently. He was amazed when he saw Mewtwo's performance. Are you kidding? Ma-kun, didn't you say he was just a B-level awakener? This person killed 3 A-level monsters, are you asking us to die? Seeing Mewtwo's strength, the companions beside Ma-kun couldn't sit still and stood up to question Ma-kun. No matter how strong they are, they have never broken through to the A-level level. Even being able to catch these heretics is mostly due to Brother Shang. How is it possible? Ma-kun clenched his fists and widened his eyes. He couldn't believe that the powerful Mewtwo in front of him was the enemy he had deliberately wanted to kill. This kid is quite interesting. Jin Shang, who was originally sitting on the rock watching the show, his eyes lit up when he saw Mewtwo's powerful combat power, and finally showed interest. Just watch him stand up slowly, and the muscles all over his body quiver like a snake. Without waiting for Ma-kun and others to react, Jin Shang's strong body had already jumped in the direction of the sandpit. Ma-kun and others looked at each other, and the tattooed man asked Ma-kun, "What should we do now?" Ma-kun looked at the clumsy team members below and gritted his teeth. "What else can we do? Go down and deal with that kid's accomplices first, and then we can kill Mewtwo together. I have pollen from Cryptozoa here. You all put it on so that the zombie heretics won't notice our presence within a quarter of an hour." WC, Ma-kun, you really spent a lot of money this time. Ma-kun gritted his teeth and said, "Stop talking nonsense. After we kill them, I will share the bulk of the resources." Just like that, after some discussion, a few people swooped down in the direction of Mewtwo and others. Mewtwo was currently fighting several terrifying A-level heretics. The smoke was filled and the blood was stained. The low-level zombies did not dare to approach under the pressure of the terrifying supernatural energy, so they rushed towards Wailinger and others. Go! Suddenly, a strong figure punched over from the fog. Mewtwo cut off one of the mutated cockroach's tentacles with a knife, then moved slightly and stepped aside. There was only a boom sound, and a big hole had been blasted out of Mewtwo's feet just now. Jin Shang walked out of the big hole. At this moment, he had taken off his shirt, revealing his muscles and fat. He is broad and strong, and almost all of his body is covered with old scars. It can be seen that this Jin Shang was also a ruthless character before the end of the world. Jin Shang grinned at Mewtwo, fists clashed, his eyes full of wanton arrogance. "Come on, boy, let me see how powerful you are. What I like most is to nip a genius like you in the cradle." At the same time, team members on the battlefield are also in crisis. Fatty took the lead in fighting the knife-throwing man who killed Matt. Fatty's special ability is speed, but the flying knife man only has to stand there and control countless flying knives to stab Fatty. Fatty can only dodge in a hurry, and he has to be wary of the zombies that may appear around him. He can't tell the difference at all. Attack with hands and feet. On the other side, Chen Weo was blocked by a tattooed man. Chen Weo was originally an important human shield in the team, and his only firepower output was the rifle he carried on his back. A square barrier stood in front of Chen Weo, holding a rifle and shooting wildly at the tattooed man. But the tattooed man showed no fear. The color of green iron appeared on his body, and his body was as if copper was poured into iron. The bullets that hit his body were bounced away instantly, and the tattooed man even had a sinister smile on his face. Going to Chen Weo. The pressure on Wailinger and Kwangwa Squirrel is even greater. The lizard man transformed by Ma-kun is extremely fast, powerful, and has extremely terrifying self-healing ability. The short man seemed to have inherited some kind of mutant gene from a reptile. He had amazing jumping ability and a flexible body, and his white steel teeth were even more indestructible. Fortunately, the crazy squirrel's body was tough and he did not fall down even after being injured many times. Wailinger relied on her flexible body skills to continuously attack Ma-kun and Ma-kun. But the lizard man transformed by Ma-kun has good defense, and also has strong self-healing ability. The short man's flexibility in jumping is no less than that of Wailinger, or even better. Wailinger even several times he was nearly killed by his counterattack. After just a few rounds of this cycle, Wailinger felt exhausted, and the giant squirrel fell to the side with scars, and could no longer play the role of a human shield. The fat man's super fast movement seemed to be a joke to the tattooed man. The tattooed man mocked. my flying knife is smeared with deadly snake venom. Don't accidentally get scratched by it, nimble little fat man. The fat man cursed secretly in his heart, and his dodging figure became awkward. On the other side, Chen Liu held up a heavy barrier shield, struggling to resist the tattooed man's serial attacks, and had no time to pay attention to others. At this point, all the team members except Mu Chu were in a hard fight and were about to lose their support and collapse. A huge boulder next to Mu Chu was shattered by a powerful fist wind. The shirtless and muscular Jin Shang walked out of the scattered smoke and dust, with a crazy fighting spirit in his eyes. My power is very simple, but it is also the most practical. As Jin Shang spoke, billowing white smoke actually came out of his body. This is a characteristic that only appears when the blood and energy in the whole body are boiling to its peak. Jin Shang's fists were so huge that the old calluses on them were clearly visible. I saw Jin Shang punching in the direction of Shang Mukcho. The strong wind of the punch made the air buzz. Mu Chu dodged and hit the ground in front of him with his fist. A huge crater was instantly created in the mine. Unparalleled strange power. My superpower is the ultimate strength. I can punch through a house with just one fist. Jin Shang's body was extremely majestic, but his body shape was actually quite flexible. When the wind hit his feet, he flew in front of Mu Chu. A pair of fleshy fists flickered and continued to attack Mu Chu, hitting his vital points with every move. Mu Chu's figure swayed from side to side, and she avoided Jin Shang's fatal fist every time, by accident or coincidence. Mu Chu could even feel the whistling wind of the fist in her ears. It's interesting. Mu Chu calmly dodged Jin Shang's fierce attack. Seeing the majestic fighting spirit on the latter's face, Mu Chu suddenly smiled and stopped. Jin Shang obviously noticed the stagnation of Mu Chu's figure, but how could he care about it at the moment? He grabbed hold of Mu Chu's flaw and concentrated his energy to strike at Mu Chu's heavenly spirit with a punch. But Mu Chu didn't flinch, grinned, and punched out in the same way. Two fists, one big and one small, collided in the air, and the powerful fist force swept up huge waves, even knocking down some low-level zombies around them to the ground. The moment the two fists clashed, Jin Shang's expression changed drastically. Mu Chu's footsteps stayed on the same spot without moving at all, while Jin Shang actually took several steps back, and his body was in a daze for a while before he calmed down. You kid. Holding his sore wrist, Jin Shang looked at Mu Chu with eyes that could no longer remain calm. In the collision just now, the one who was clearly at a disadvantage was actually him, an A-level awakened person with unparalleled power. Mu Chu's strength was actually greater than his. Jin Shang stabilized his mind, put away the contempt in his heart, and looked at Mu Chu with a cautious look on his face. Very good, you are worthy of my full strength. I saw Jin Shang's muscles quivering like a snake, and the strange energy in his body began to work crazily in his internal organs. Soon, the white steam coming out of his body began to rise rapidly, and even his body surface showed a strange deep red color. At this moment, the B-level mutated zombie felt the vigorous blood in Jin Shang's body, and roared and bit at Jin Shang's strong body. Jin Shang rolled his eyes and punched out with his steaming muscular arm. An unparalleled punch packed with sand and dust directly blew the zombie's head open. At this moment, several A-level heretic monsters that Mu Chu had repelled earlier had wounds and blood on their bodies, and they all surrounded Mu Chu with red eyes. At this moment, they were all angered by Mu Chu. They even ignored Jin Shang beside them and attacked Mu Chu with the force of encirclement. The light of the sword, the shadow of the fist, the blood-spattered sharp teeth, seemed to be about to tear Mu Chu into pieces in the next second. Mu Chu. Lu Qingfei looked in the steel fence surrounded by 4 A-level beings and was in danger, and couldn't help but scream. Any A-level awakened person will only end up being torn apart in the face of such a terrifying lineup, not to mention that Jin Shang is the best even among the A-level awakened people in Yuhai base. At the critical moment, Lu Qingfei suddenly realized that her left hand was empty, and an orange-red figure ran towards Mu Chu. Pray, I saw a girl in an orange-red goldfish suit rushing into the tide of corpses without thinking about her own safety. Not far away was Mu Chu, who was surrounded by a pack of wolves. The other members of the team are already stretched thin and find it difficult to withstand the strong offensive of Ma Kun and his party. But when he saw Chi-Chi rushing into the tide of corpses alone, even though he didn't understand what he meant, he still tried his best to escort Chi-Chi to Mu Chu's side. And the cost of doing so is extremely heavy. Chen Weo directly removed the barrier in front of him and instead erected a barrier shield as high as one person to protect Lu Qi. Seeing this opportunity, the tattooed man punched Chen Weo on the neck. Immediately, Chen Weiguo's brain went blank and he flew away far away. Fatty and Weilinger gave up their original fight and fought back all the zombies that rushed towards Chi-Chi. But this made Ma Kun and his team seize the opportunity. The fat man was directly stabbed by several flying knives. The blades were smeared with poison, and he immediately fell to the ground in severe pain. Weilinger was also whipped away by Ma Kun's giant lizard tail. Already exhausted, she even exited the cat state. The squirrel beside her was also jumped down by the short man, and a large piece of flesh and blood was bitten off the squirrel's thigh. Dripping with blood, he shrank in size and passed out next to Weilinger. At this point, all members of the squad were defeated except for Mu Chu. Ma Kun looked at Weilinger and others who were lying on the ground and were being slaughtered, but he said to his companions behind him, "Let's go, deal with Mu Chu first, and then take care of these people." On the other side, Mu Chu, who was surrounded by many A-level monsters, also felt a little headache. Although his ice power is extremely powerful and has many wonderful uses, it seems a little stretched when facing such a large number of A-level heretics. Just as he was considering whether to release part of the Fire Lord's power, an orange figure ran towards him from behind. The giant cockroach's mouthparts were sprayed with dark green corrosive juice, and it danced its tentacles and rushed towards Chi-Chi. Mu Chu's body swayed, and a crystal blue dagger condensed from the ice mist in his hand, and he thrust it into the back of the giant cockroach. The giant cockroach roared and fell backwards, but Mu Chu had already taken the girl into his arms. "I pray." Chi-Chi raised her delicate and angelic face, held Mu Chu's handsome face with her jade hands, looked into each other's eyes, and whispered, "Chu, please. Use me." Mu Chu raised a smile on her lips, gently stroked the girl's soft pink hair, and replied in her ear, "Okay." Almost at the same time Mu Chu responded, an invisible energy began to surround the two of them. On Mu Chu's chest, the king's mark produced after devouring the void genome began to shine with an inexplicable luster. A series of sequences that seemed to be composed of genes began to wrap around the two people. Mu Chu's eyes instantly turned into a deep red, and they looked at each other with Chi-Chi's crimson pupils. It was as if a chain composed of order turned into a crystal white chain and flowed around the two of them. Mu Chu raised her right hand and gently floated it on the girl's graceful chest. Just when everyone was confused, a scene happened that shocked everyone. A bright white hole appeared in Chi-Chi's chest, and there seemed to be infinite void inside. The gorgeous silver braid instantly wrapped around Mu Chu's arm. Immediately afterwards, Mu Chu actually inserted her right hand deep into the endless hole in Chi-Chi's chest. Chi-Chi let out a thump, and her soft and boneless waist was held in Mu Chu's arms. Her eyes were closed, as if she had lost consciousness. Mu Chu twitched her arm, and something seemed to be pulled out of the infinite white void. In an instant, surrounding the two of them, a dazzling light curtain rose into the sky, illuminating the sky. Then, what the hell is that? Everyone looked at the soaring light pillar that penetrated the sky, and the powerful fluctuations even caused chaos in the clouds into a whirlpool. They were shocked for a moment without knowing why. But then, a scene that shocked them even more appeared. Mu Chu was seen holding her sister in her left arm, and her right hand was raised high, holding a giant long sword that was as tall as a person. No, compared to a long sword, the weapon in Mu Chu's hand is more like a terrifying broadsword, with a black-gray hilt, a ferocious silver-blue blade, and the top of the blade is shaped like a blade. It looks domineering and has a disharmonious beauty. The length of this huge sword alone is 2 meters. The specific form can be searched on Baidu, I won't describe it too much here. The giant sword shone with silvery white light, and the smooth and sharp blade exuded a destructive and terrifying aura. Then, that's Chi-Chi's great sword of the void. Even Weilinger and others were intimidated by this powerful formation. They just saw Mu Chu inserting his hand into the white hole on Chi-Chi's chest before pulling out such a hideous-looking weapon. The terrifying huge sword. No, this is probably his last trump card. Jin Shang's eyes narrowed, with a hint of horror deep in his pupils. From that giant sword, he felt a terrible destructive aura, even he felt afraid. Ma Kun was the first to react. Hurry up and come together, Don't let him have a chance to react. I don't believe it. With so many people together, they can't kill him. Ma Kun and others rushed towards Mewtwo, and the surviving heretical monsters also rushed towards Mewtwo without fear of death. At this moment, like thousands of horses galloping, the land where the mine is located is shaken by the alliance formed by the Awakened Ones and the Heretics, and these hundreds of monsters have only one target, the black-robed figure under the soaring light curtain. Is this the power of the void? Mewtwo looked at the huge void sword in her hand with a calm expression, which was as tall as a person. This was the power called void, hidden in Chi-Chi's body. The heart is embodied and extracted, and it is made from the human heart, the crown of sin. He lowered his head to look at the girl in his arms, only to find that Chi-Chi had lost consciousness and fainted in his arms. Mewtwo kissed the girl's forehead gently and said softly, "Have a good rest and leave the rest to me." Feeling the abundant power in her body, looking down at the hordes of heretics running toward her, Mewtwo still had a calm smile on her face. This is a powerful ability that is completely different from the devouring ability. Although it does not have the world-destroying power of the Fire Demon Lord, the bonus given to Mewtwo is completely different from the devouring ability. Mewtwo held Chi-Chi in her arms with her left hand, and held a 2-meter-long giant sword in her right hand. As Mewtwo moved, pieces of ice crystals appeared under her feet. Mewtwo was seen waving the void sword in his hand, the blade flashed, and a dazzling silver-white arc cut through the sky. Not good. Feeling the fatal fluctuation contained in this silver horse training, Ma Kun and others quickly stopped and used their strongest defensive forms to resist the attack. Even the strongest Jin Shang had to cross his arms and his body surface turned abnormally red. This was his final move to squeeze physical energy in exchange for a steel body. But those heretics who are not afraid of death will naturally not stop their bloodthirsty pace. Whoosh! The silver-white narrow blade sliced through, and the air seemed to be still at this moment. The next second, only a bang was heard, and a sound like a mountain collapsing and the earth cracking resounded throughout the world. Everyone turned around and saw that a mine made of gravel and rock not far behind was split in half by this blade. As for the heretics who came to fight against Mewtwo, a line of blood appeared out of thin air on their bodies, and then with a pop, their bodies were cut in half and torn apart. The blood of hundreds of monsters spurted and splashed at the same time. The mine instantly became like a river of blood, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. Only a few A-level heretics withstood this terrifying blow, but they were all injured, with panic and fear in their eyes. The power of the sword caused hundreds of heretic monsters to lie down on their heads. Are you kidding? How can this kind of power be an A-level awakened person? The fat man lay on the ground, looking at Mewtwo in front of him as if he were a god descending from heaven. His eyes were full of disbelief. Then he asked his companions in a low voice. "We shouldn't be dead now, right?" Wei Ling'er's eyes also flashed with brilliance, and then she nodded solemnly. "As long as Mewtwo is here, nothing will happen to us." Ma Kun and others were obviously not feeling well at this time. There was a bright blood mark on Jin Shang's arms, and blood was still flowing out. Ma Kun even had an arm cut off by a blade. Although the lizard man has a strong ability to heal himself, it is obvious that he will not be able to regenerate the severed limb for a while. The flying knife man threw dozens of flying knives in front of him the moment the silver-white horse passed by. However, he was obviously helpless against this B-level heretic who could kill with one strike. He was killed by a sword in the void, and his blood was spread across the sky. Although the short man with lustful eyes was agile, Mewtwo's blade was much faster than his reaction. He could almost only watch helplessly as the gorgeous silver horse gradually enlarged in front of his eyes, and his body was split in half in an instant. Only the remaining tattooed man who could turn his body into iron could barely withstand this shocking blow. He was panting and looking at Mewtwo, his eyes full of horror and fear. "MD Ma Kun, I am going to be killed by you here today." The tattooed man turned to look at Ma Kun and cursed angrily. If he had known that Mewtwo's strength was so terrifying, he would never have done this. "Stop making noise." Jin Shang spoke in a rare angry voice, and looked at Mewtwo warily. "This energy has far exceeded the level of A level, and is only a hair away from S level. Although I don't know where he got this giant sword, but he can't maintain this state forever." Shang must have tried his best when he held this giant sword and swung it. Ma Kun has the most flexible mind and instantly understood what Jin Shang meant. When his strength is exhausted, we will catch him again and ask him to find out the origin of this giant sword. The awakened one who is just a hair away from S-class. The shock in the hearts of everyone could not be greater. What kind of power can allow Chu, an awakened person who has just stepped into A level, to have abilities comparable to S level? But the next second, Jin Shang's plan obviously failed. Chu was seen stepping on ice crystals at his feet. His figure was as fast as the wind, and he arrived in front of the giant cockroach in the blink of an eye. A ferocious sword several feet long, accompanied by a silver-white chain of order, slashed at the giant cockroach's head. The seriously injured cockroach was split in half, and dark green blood splashed out like a fountain. With just one strike, a powerful A-level heretic was cut in half. The huge corpse of the giant cockroach split into two halves, and the sound of falling to the ground resounded throughout the audience. A shockingly powerful A-level heretic was torn in half by Chu's sword in less than a round. A gust of wind struck behind him like lightning, but Chu seemed unaware of it. It was not until a cold light was close to her face that Chu waved her hand and stood the giant sword in front of her. A brilliant disk of light suddenly appeared on the blade, and the giant mantis's serrated swords made a swish sound in the air, and instantly struck the disk of light. When the two struck each other, the light curtain that seemed as thin as a cicada's wings did not move at all. On the other hand, the mutant mantis, which was as tall as a giant, was staggered and fell to the ground. The scarlet compound eyes of the mantis are wide open, its back wings are flapping and it is about to fly away. But how could Chu give it this chance? A blue sword edge was swung out along with a silver-white sword, directly cutting off the back wing of the giant mantis. The ferocious blade was like a giant dragon flying across the sky. The mantis's serrated double blades were instantly cracked, and then Chu jumped up and wiped out the mantis head with one knife. The two-headed hound not far behind him felt the majestic and vast energy vortex around Chu, then looked at the corpse of the giant cockroach not far away, lowered his head, screamed in grief, and tried to escape. A cold light flashed in Chu's eyes, and she moved her left arm holding Chi slightly. A ball of ice mist exploded out of thin air in the palm of her hand, hitting the two-headed hound's hind legs like a water bomb. In an instant, the hound's hind legs were frozen. In this moment of delay, Chu stepped on the ice crystal and came to the two-headed hound. With one blow, the two heads turned into two heads, and a blue crystal core with blood stains fell to the ground. When Ma Kun saw this scene, he was immediately frightened. Looking at Chu's terrifying posture with a ferocious giant sword in his hand, killing everyone, how could he look like he was exhausted and about to collapse from exhaustion? Chu ducked to the side of the tattooed man with green skin. The tattooed man no longer looked as arrogant as before. He was seriously injured by a blade. He had no ability to fight back at this moment. He stumbled to the ground and kept retreating. "You, don't come over, I'm from the Shoryukai." Before he finished speaking, a human head fell from the sky. The blood on the neck of the headless corpse splattered like a fountain, and the blood on the ground seemed to have condensed into a river of blood. Noisy. Chu's face showed disdain, and she quickly walked slowly to the last survivors of the group, Ma Kun and Jin Shang. There was a deep blood mark on Ma Kun's chest, and one of his arms was missing, and his severed limb was still bleeding gurglingly. But now he couldn't care about the serious injuries on his body. He looked at Chu who was walking towards him and cried miserably, "Chu, we are all from the Shenglong Society, and Brother Shang is a capable cadre under Boss Wang. If something happens, Boss Wang will never let you go." Seeing the expressionless expression on Chu's calm face, Ma Kun said hurriedly, "Boss Wang is one of the 3 guardians of Jade Sea. You cannot afford to offend a destructive level powerhouse. Why don't we each take a step back?" Quote. Chu's figure passed Ma Kun. Ma Kun's eyes suddenly showed a look of joy, and his wretched face was squeezed into a chrysanthemum. Just when he was still thinking about what to say to compliment Chu, he suddenly felt a chill in his chest. Ma Kun looked down and saw a crystal blue ice pick piercing his chest, with blood dripping from it. Ma Kun's pupils were full of horror. He turned to look at Chu's back, but the blood gushing from his throat made him speechless. Ma Kun's eyes gradually lost focus, and then boundless darkness hit. Miu Chu retracted the arm that released the ice pick, and hugged Chi-Chi, who was sleeping peacefully in her arms, tighter. From beginning to end, he never took Ma Kun seriously, he was just a clown. Jin Shang licked the blood flowing between his arms, looked at Miu Chu, who was walking towards him, and stood up with a calm expression, as if he was not the one experiencing a life and death crisis. Unlike Ma Kun, who prayed for his life to survive, he didn't have time to think about the reason for Miu Chu's sudden increase in strength. There is only one way to survive right now. Nothing but fighting. All I heard was Jin Shang said in a deep voice, "By holding that woman, are you looking down on me?" Jin Shang has experienced countless challenges and life and death tests, but only his current opponent has such a casual attitude towards him. Holding a woman in his arms obviously cannot bring out his full combat power. Even if it is a life and death battle, in Jin Shang's opinion, this is a great contempt for him. Miu Chu's steps were slow, as if he was afraid of waking up the sleeping beauty in his arms. A slightly contemptuous voice came from his mouth. This short word instantly made Jin Shang furious. The muscles of his body began to bulge, and white steam rose from his back like mist. Mukcho. The furious Jin Shang's fighting spirit reached its peak in an instant, and the temperature of his body surface continued to rise, turning red at a speed visible to the naked eye. The texture of the muscles and the veins under the skin are clearly visible. At this moment, Jin Shang seems to be standing at the pinnacle of human strength, like a muscle monster wearing human skin. Jin Shang swung his fist, and the powerful punch struck Miu Chu with the feeling of breaking wind. There was even a faint roar in the air. The power of this punch alone was enough to collapse a tall building. Before the powerful fist hit Miu Chu, the force of the fist had already caused Miu Chu's broken hair to flutter, but the eyes and face under the broken hair were calm and surprisingly calm. That annoying calm face again. Jin Shang's expression became even more ferocious. For some reason, from the first moment he saw Miu Chu, he was deeply disgusted by his cynical and calm expression. How could this expression appear in this cruel apocalypse where people eat people? Die. An ice wall suddenly appeared in front of Miu Chu, and Jin Shang's huge flesh fist instantly penetrated the thick crystal blue ice wall, and was about to hit Miu Chu's body. Jin Shang's eyes flashed with excitement, as if he had already seen the bloody scene of Miu Chu's flesh and blood. But at the moment when Jin Shang's iron fist shattered the ice wall, Miu Chu raised the void sword in her hand. A silver-white light curtain suddenly appeared on the sword blade, blocking Miu Chu like an indestructible solid shield. His fist hit the light shield, and there was a click sound. Jin Shang could clearly hear the breaking sound coming from his arm bones. But the light curtain in front of him still stood firmly in front of Miu Chu, like a soldier who would never betray. The blade vibrated violently, and a magnificent silver-white blade cut through the sky again. This time, only Jin Shang's legs were cut off. The muscular man who had lost his legs lay weakly on the ground. Looking at Miu Chu, who was walking towards him step by step, holding his sister in his arms and holding a giant sword in his hand, his eyes were full of unwillingness. "No, I am not willing to accept it. Without that sword, you are nothing." "Oh." Miu Chu still responded with an indifferent expression, but the ferocious sword blade in her hand continued to enlarge in front of Jin Shang's eyes. Maybe. This was the last sound Jin Shang heard. The sand and dust swept up and flew under the powerful air wave of the huge sword in the void, blurring everyone's sight. The team members could only vaguely see Jin Shang's majestic figure under the wind and sand, falling to the ground after a brilliant flash of sword light. It was only through the dust and haze that no one could see that they could notice that when the void sword in Miu Chu's hand was inserted into Jin Shang's heart, an inexplicable energy was continuously extracted from Jin Shang's body, and finally all of it was transported along the blade. Entered Miu Chu's body. Correspondingly, Jin Shang's originally strong body seemed to have been drained of life, and quickly withered and withered. When the last trace of supernatural energy in Jin Shang's body was drained away, Jin Shang's gray body disappeared in the air like smoke and sand in an instant. Feeling the extra strength in her body, Miu Chu didn't think about it and directly attached it to the demonic energy that contained the Ox Talisman in the Fire Demon Lord. After absorbing Jin Shang's huge power, Miu Chu held Lu Qi in her arms and held the 2-meter-long ferocious giant sword in her right hand. She turned around and looked around. At this moment, the sounds between heaven and earth seemed to be blocked, and only the heavy breathing of the team members not far away could be heard in silence. The originally empty sandy land was now covered with mountains of corpses and seas of blood, as if it were paved with a carpet made of blood. The blood in the pool of blood on the ground had not solidified yet, and it was covered with mutilated corpses and horrific heads. Miu Chu's footsteps moved slightly, and the pool of blood under her body instantly solidified into ice, and a long and narrow ice road that could only be passed by one person appeared. While Miu Chu was walking across the ice road, the void sword in his hand also turned into streams of silver-white swords like flowing clouds, all of which merged into the white hollow that appeared on Chi-Chi's chest. The pink-haired girl in her arms had her eyelashes trembling slightly, as if she was still asleep. When Miu Chu walked out of the ice road, everyone saw that the domineering giant sword in the void had gradually transformed into a stream of light and disappeared, and Miu Chu was holding Lu Qi by the waist and walking out slowly. Miu Chu. The team members stared blankly at Miu Chu, who walked out of the mountain of corpses and sea of blood with a calm smile on his face, and were stunned for a moment. Joy, shock, wonder, admiration, doubt. A series of expressions appeared in the eyes of several people like a roller coaster. They have too many questions in their minds that they want to express, but they don't know where to start. Why did Miu Chu's strength suddenly surge so horribly? What is the origin of that ferocious giant sword? And why was that giant sword drawn out from Chi-Chi's body? Several people looked at each other, and even the fat man who was poisoned had no time to care about his physical injuries. Miu Chu walked to Wei Ling, handed her the Chi-Chi in her arms, and then walked to the fat man. A white halo brewed in Miu Chu's palm, and then penetrated into the fat man's body. The fat man immediately felt that the poisonous pain in his body was gradually disappearing, and his complexion gradually returned to normal from a strange blue-black color. Lu Qingfei, who had been hiding in the fence, also brought Xu Wen to the crowd and began to treat others. The first thing the fat man did after he recovered was not to ask Miu Chu. Instead, regardless of the injuries on his body and the blood on the ground, he threw himself directly into the pile of corpses in front, shouting with shining eyes, "Woohoo! Get rich!" At this time, Chen Weo dragged his scarred body to Miu Chu. Looking at the mountain of corpses and sea of blood not far away, he asked tentatively, "Miu Chu, what are you?" At this moment, everyone was looking at Miu Chu. There was no other reason. Miu Chu had given them too many surprises along the way. It can be said that without Miu Chu's presence, whether they would have survived the first trip is a matter of doubt. In response to everyone's questions, Miu Chu already had an answer in her mind. She turned to look at the girl in Wei Ling's arms and said, "It's Chi-Chi." What? Everyone quickly turned their attention to the sleeping Chi-Chi. Could it be that the reason why Miu Chu's strength soared to such an extent was because of this weak girl who seemed to be so weak? But isn't her power related to the spiritual type? Miu Chu smiled and stroked the girl's pale pink hair, with a gentle meaning in her eyes. I pray that she is actually an awakener of twin powers. Her other power is to breed the twins. The giant sword named Void. That giant sword can greatly increase the user's strength, and it is by borrowing the power of the Void sword that I can wipe out Jin Shang and the others. Through Miu Chu's words, he shaped Chi-Chi into an awakened person with powerful auxiliary functions, thus covering up the reason for his sudden increase in strength. Of course, this is indeed the case. Another twin with superpowers. Can it raise the realm of the awakened person to nearly a level? There are such wonderful powers in the world. Everyone looked at Chi-Chi as if they were looking at a rare treasure. Since that great void sword can elevate Miu Chu, an A-level awakener, to a level that is infinitely close to S-level. Then if it were an S-level or even destruction level awakener holding that giant sword, to what extent would his strength skyrocket? Seeing the amazement in everyone's eyes, Miu Chu smiled bitterly and said, "Unfortunately, Chi-Chi's ability requires someone to sign a contract to activate, and this contract can only be bound to one person." With that said, Miu Chu opened the shirt on her chest, and a mark of the king, with a dim light suddenly appeared on her strong and straight chest. That's it. Everyone shook their heads and sighed, but they also felt that it was reasonable. If anyone can possess such a powerful power, then Chi-Chi will really become the target of competition from all parties. Looking at it this way, he is really no different from Chi-Chi in the anime. Fatty exclaimed from a distance. No matter what, it's all thanks to you this time, Miu Chu. Without you, I'm afraid it would be difficult for us to get here. Chen Weo had a simple and honest smile on his face, and it could be seen that he was sincerely grateful to Mu Chu. Other members of the team also expressed their gratitude to Mu Chu. After all, Mu Chu had saved their lives several times. Even Lu Qingfei had to admit that Mu Chu played a much greater role in the team than she did. Mu Chu did not refuse everyone's thanks, but replied meaningfully, I would also like to thank you for taking me on a pleasant journey. The experience along the way made Mu Chu find it quite interesting. If he were the Fire Lord, he would not have seen so many beautiful scenery along the way. Wei Ling, on the other hand, was not polite and snorted, I am not a good judge of people, but it was all my efforts that brought Mu Chu in. While several members of the team were chatting enthusiastically, a wailing sound reached everyone's ears not far away. Everyone heard the sound and went away, only to find that the source of the sound was Song Konghua, who had betrayed them and escaped alone not long ago, and was nailed to the ground by the flying knife man. At this time, Song Konghua was not feeling well. His thigh was pierced by a flying knife. The flying knife was also smeared with poison. The poison quickly flowed down his thigh and throughout his body, and the severe pain in his body was even worse. It was unbearable for him. Because he was leaning on the other side of the fence, Song Konghua was not immediately attacked by the corpses. Instead, after a period of fermentation, his body was about to be unable to withstand the torment of the poison, so he asked for help. Several people walked up to Song Konghua, and the fat man holding a bunch of shining crystal cores in his arms immediately cursed, Bah, you traitor who eats everything inside and outside. Wei Ling naturally didn't like this kind of selfish villain who was greedy for life and afraid of death in times of crisis, so she snorted coldly and turned away. Mu Chu's expression was indifferent, and a crystal blue dagger slowly formed in her hand, and she slowly walked towards Song Konghua. Song Konghua looked at Mu Chu walking towards him with a dagger in his hand. The expression on his face was extremely frightening. Along with the sharp pain from the rising poison, it was the first time that he felt that the crisis of death was so close to him. He hurriedly looked at concubine Lu Qing next to Mu Chu, and said in panic, Concubine Qing, please save me. When concubine Lu Qing saw Song Konghua's undisputed appearance, the disappointment in her eyes was no longer concealed. She sighed softly and still stood in front of Mu Chu. Seeing concubine Lu Qing standing in front of her, Mu Chu's eyes showed no surprise. On the contrary, she asked in amusement, Are you going to stop me this time, my holy mother? Hearing Mu Chu's slightly mocking tone, Lu Qingfei felt extremely complicated and said, Mu Chu, how can you say that Konghua is also a member of our team? And there are fewer and fewer awakened people in Yuhai base. Although he has done some wrong things, we can let him make up for his mistakes in the future. At this moment, Chen Weo couldn't help but comfort him. Mu Chu, how about we give Konghua another chance? They knew in their hearts that with Mu Chu's current strength, no one in the field could stop him, so they could only try to persuade Mu Chu to spare Song Konghua's life. The corners of Mu Chu's mouth rose, as if she thought of something interesting. Mu Chu sneered and passed by concubine Lu Qing, then came to the dying Song Kong's incarnation. I seem to have said that I will let you die without a burial place next time. Mu Chu's faintly smiling words fell into Song Konghua's ears, which was undoubtedly the death sentence. In the face of life and death, Song Konghua no longer cared about dignity and did not care about his serious physical injuries. Song Konghua endured the severe pain and knelt down, kowtowing to Mu Chu. It was my ignorance that offended Boss Mu. Considering that we have worked together before, I beg you to spare my life. From now on, I, Song Konghua, will only look up to you, Boss Mu. Quote. Song Konghua didn't have any arrogance at this moment. He knocked his head several times until his forehead started to bleed, but he still didn't dare to stop. After kowtowing dozens of times, Song Konghua looked at Mu Chu with his trembling head covered in blood. Mu Chu casually discarded the ice dagger with a faint smile on her face. I can promise not to kill you, but there is one condition. Don't let me see you again. Lu Qingfei and Chen Weo on the side heard this, and their faces immediately showed joy. Although Song Konghua was expelled from the team, it was still better than losing his life. Song Konghua was also extremely excited. In any case, his life was saved. But I was thinking secretly in my heart that when I returned to the base, I would sue Mewtwo to the law enforcement team for killing his colleagues. By then the evidence would be conclusive, and under the intimidation of the base's top brass, Mewtwo would have to shed his skin even if he didn't die. But then, Song Konghua's right half of his body suddenly went numb, followed by heartbreaking pain. Ah! Song Konghua howled heartbreakingly, and saw that the right half of his body was neatly cut off, and the missing body parts were still bleeding. Mewtwo withdrew her expression and retracted the condensed ice sword in her hand. At this moment, the Bingfang blade was still stained with a large amount of blood, and it looked magnificent but also had a touch of monster. Mewtwo's move was very measured, perfectly avoiding Song Konghua's vital points, so that even if he lost half of his body, he would not die immediately. I said, I won't kill you. Mewtwo turned around, smiled lightly at concubine Lu Qing and Chen Weio and said, the smell of blood here is too strong, and it will soon attract the attention of the surrounding zombies. If you don't want to die, just leave. There was still that handsome smile on his face. But in the eyes of Lu Qingfei and Chen Weio, Mewtwo's smile was nothing less than a devil's smile. The two of them looked at Song Konghua, who had half of his body cut off, and saw that half of his body was in a weird twisted posture in pain. The blood that had been lost had gathered under him into a pool of blood, and the only remaining eye was due to the violent injury. The pain in his body was almost bulging out, his forehead was soaked with beads of sweat as big as soybeans, tears were streaming down his face, and his pupils were full of horror and fear. Chen Weio shook his head at concubine Lu Qing. It would be better for Song Konghua to live like this and die happily. Moreover, this place will soon be visited by a large number of zombie heretics. Song Konghua in this state will only become a full meal for zombies in a short time. Concubine Lu Qing looked at Mewtwo's leaving figure with shocked eyes. What has this young man experienced that makes his heart so cruel? His handsome appearance seems to be just a skin, but his heart is like a devil. While everyone in the team was still collecting crystal nuclei left on the battlefield, there was a hill dozens of kilometers away. A sophisticated team of hundreds of people was moving through the forest. This team is uniformly dressed in black uniforms, moves with extraordinary agility and speed, and even the weapons and equipment they carry are top-notch in the world. But the man leading the way was wearing a white suit, a pair of black-rimmed glasses, white hair, and an indifferent expression. Unlike other team members who were fast and agile, the steps of this white-haired man were quite slow. But what is surprising is that as soon as the white-haired man took a step, his figure already appeared dozens of meters away, and even the space he passed felt a momentary shock. The white-haired man had already crossed a distance of tens of meters in a blink of an eye. Even though he was walking like a leisurely stroll, he still kept the subordinates behind him far away. Team leader. Suddenly there was a voice in the sky, and the white-haired man looked up. It turned out to be a humanoid figure with two wings on its back, waving its wings and hovering in the air, saying to the white-haired man below, if we walk more than 10 kilometers further, we will enter the city center of Lan'an City. Just as the white-haired man was about to nod, a rustling sound suddenly came from the grass beside him. Immediately afterwards, a pair of scarlet blood eyes flashed in the bush, and a huge wild boar burst out of the jungle with a pair of ferocious tusks. And the target of this wild boar was clearly the white-haired man walking at the front of the team. The wild boar's tusks shot straight into the sky, stained with traces of blood, and the wild boar's physique far exceeded the average level. Just one impact was enough to smash through a house. This turned out to be a powerful alien beast with an A-level alien energy. The strong air wave carried the huge body of the wild boar and swept towards it, but the white-haired man seemed to be unaware of it and said, has the specific location been confirmed? The white-haired man pushed his hand to hold the frame, and at the same time, the huge collision of the wild boar came. But just when the ferocious tusks of the wild boar were about to hit the white-haired man, the space around the white-haired man was distorted for a moment, and the white-haired man actually disappeared in place. The wild boar's blow missed the target and hit a giant tree behind. The fangs were deeply stuck in the tree. Just when the mutated wild boar looked confused, the white-haired man was already standing on the wild boar's broad back. The white-haired man pulled out the two sword handles from his waist, held them with both hands, and two laser beams shot out from the handles. The white-haired man turned his wrist, and two bright laser beams penetrated the thick neck of the mutated wild boar. The man's body flashed, and the next second he appeared on the flat ground not far away, holding a blue crystal core in his hand. The light was scattered through the gaps between the leaves. The white-haired man's face was expressionless, and only a curtain of light flashed through his black-rimmed glasses. The huge body of the mutated wild boar crashed to the ground, and the blood from its neck sputtered out like a fountain. The awakened person flying in the sky held a map in his hand and considered. The approximate location should be determined now. The white-haired man stopped, looked at the law enforcement team members who were still rushing towards him in the distance, and ordered, "Now notify the surrounding search teams to suspend all tasks and arrive at Lannan Central Square within half a day to gather." Yes, there was nothing unexpected about the awakened person above the airspace. He also believed that the surrounding searcher teams would not disobey this order. Because, this man is one of the very few S-class awakened people in the base, and he is also the captain of the law enforcement team of Yuhai's 3rd Brigade, Ji Yufeng, who is known as the White Death. In a convenience supermarket near the outskirts of Lannan City, the fat man was staring closely at a boiler in front of him, with a stream of saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Inside the alcohol boiler were some packaged foods similar to canned lunch meat left in the supermarket. These days, the team members have been searching for resources in the ruins, and they have to be alert to dangers that may appear at any time. The food they eat is all instant biscuits and canned food. This made the gluttonous fat man so greedy that after arriving at the supermarket, he immediately suggested that the exhausted people use the alcohol boiler and ingredients in the supermarket to make a simple hot pot meal. Chen Weo walked from the shelf with a few cans in his hand. When he saw the fat man staring at the boiler and salivating, he reminded him, "Don't be careless. Since we came to this neighborhood, there have been fewer and fewer zombies around. This is already close to the city center. It stands to reason that there must be a lot of zombies in groups. Something is wrong with this situation now." When the fat man heard this, his fat body immediately trembled. He suddenly remembered the strange baby he had encountered at the 3rd People's Hospital of Lannan City. Although the crises he encountered later were more terrifying than that of the strange baby, the terrifying atmosphere in the hospital that night made Fatty unforgettable for a long time. At this moment, Wei Linger, Lu Qingfei and Xu Wen also walked out of the store on the other side. Different from Fatty and Chen Weo, the 3 women had changed their clothes, and even their hands were packed with brand-name clothes and luxury cosmetics. "I'm so lucky. This supermarket hasn't been raided yet." The faces of Wei Linger and the 3 girls were filled with the joy of harvest, and they didn't look tired at all. For things like shopping, girls seem to be born with some kind of buff and will never feel tired. Wei Linger came over carrying gorgeously packaged clothes. She only saw Fatty and Chen Weo squatting on the ground. She couldn't help but asked in surprise, "Where are Miuchu and Ichi?" The fat man had a look of envy on his face and complained in a sour tone, "Where else can we go? Of course we have been to the world of two." In another store of the supermarket, Miuchu walked in front with his hands behind his back to observe, while Chi-Chi followed closely beside him. Although after a few days of getting along, Chi-Chi and Wei Linger had become familiar with each other, but due to the binding effect of the rat charm, she still subconsciously wanted to stay with Miuchu. Naturally Miuchu wouldn't mind. After all, it can be said that he created Chi-Chi's life. Chi-Chi is a weapon in his hand, and it is a strength that belongs to him alone. Miuchu will never give it up to him at any time. While Miuchu was admiring the dazzling array of products on the booth, Chi-Chi stopped in front of a counter. Miuchu looked around and found that the product on the counter was a pink rabbit doll. Miuchu walked to the booth and put her palms close to the glass. Red mist flashed from the palm of his hand, and a round hole was immediately dissolved into the glass. Miuchu took out the rabbit doll and handed it into the girl's arms. Chi-Chi hugged the pink doll blankly, her eyes inexplicable. With a smile on her face, Miuchu rubbed the girl's light pink hair, which was as soft as cherry blossoms. After stretching, Miuchu planned to go back and see what the fat man was up to. Autumn. Just as Miuchu took a few steps, a girl's voice was suddenly heard from behind. Miuchu turned around and saw that Chi-Chi was holding a pink stuffed doll in her arms. She turned out a red string with both hands to make a pattern and placed it on her chest. There was a rare smile on the girl's lips. At this moment, it's like cherry blossoms blooming. On Chi-Chi's chest stands a suspension bridge made of red flower rope. The dusk sunlight shines in through the window, and the corners of the lips on the girl's flawless and pretty face are raised with a bright and moving smile. I have to admit, Chi-Chi looks beautiful like this. At this moment, Miu-Chu narrowed the corners of her eyes, looked in another direction, and at the same time, a slender hair-like ice needle popped out with her hand. The ice needle streaked through the air as fast as lightning, and instantly hit a disc-shaped flying object by the window in the distance. With a thought in Miu-Chu's mind, an invisible force of thought directly took the disc over. Monitor. Looking at the disc-like aircraft in front of me, the camera in the center has been destroyed by the ice needle launched by Miu-Chu. Below it is a row of mechanical suction cup tentacles with extremely strong adsorption force. It was these tentacles that drove the circle just now. The plate hangs outside the window. Miu-Chu looked out the window again, and there was nothing there. Miu-Chu frowned, and then took Chi-Chi back to the foyer of the supermarket. This should be a surveillance device modified from a drone. In the foyer, Chen Huio dismantled the disc device into pieces, but in the end he did not analyze any useful information. There is no way. After all, Chen Huio was just an authentic migrant worker before the end of the world. Even if he has gained some knowledge and experience in the past 2 years, he is confused when it comes to analyzing these high technologies. After watching for a long time, Chen Huio could only hold back one sentence: "It seems that we are being watched. We shouldn't stay here for a long time. Listening to your words is like a speech." Miu-Chu nodded and looked at the others. Weilinger also nodded. No matter what the other party's purpose is, we should be more vigilant at this time. The fat man held the unfinished hot pot in the bowl and screamed, "My stomach is not full and I have to rush again." But while several people were discussing, a communicator in Weilinger's arms rang. Weilinger's eyebrows were slightly curved. This communicator was a dedicated line for contacting the base. Under normal circumstances, the search team asked Yuhai for help. It was rare for calls from the opposite side. After it was connected, a vague sound suddenly came from inside, mixed with several strings of current sounds. Only Miu-Chu heard the message clearly, and when he heard a familiar word, a light flashed in Miu-Chu's eyes. After a short conversation, Weilinger put down the communicator and sighed to the team, "We are busy again. There is news from above that all the teams currently performing search missions in Linan City are ordered to arrive at the central square of Linan within half a day. It seems that this time is another big task." As soon as this statement came out, the team members present were all amazed and inexplicable. "Why, when we came out this time, we were almost wiped out. What the hell is this up there?" Among them, Fatty's reaction was the most intense. After all, this search mission could be said to be a real escape from death. From the strange baby in the hospital at the beginning, to the shock at the Survivor Hotel, to the subsequent ambush in the mine, every incident can be said to be unprecedented and normally far beyond what a B-level team like them can experience. After finally getting through the accident without any danger, Fatty now just wants to have a good rest and return to the Yuhai base to be happy. The ruins of this city are full of dangers, and it is simply not a place for humans. If it weren't for the unfinished task that Lu Qingfei entrusted to the team by her superiors, I'm afraid the team would have gone back home and left Linan City, a place of right and wrong. And when I heard that so many teams were required to go out together to carry out the mission, didn't it seem obvious that this was a dangerous and fatal mission? Whoever wants to go on this mission can do it. Anyway, I won't go there again. If you ask me about it then, just tell me that I'm seriously injured and can't live anymore. As soon as the fat man waved his hand, he planned to give up his job. Weilinger had known he would say this, so she sighed softly and said, "The person who issued the summons mission this time is Ji Yufeng from the law enforcement team." Ji Yufeng, that white god of death, how could he leave Yuhai and come to Linan City? Oh my god, why is that evil star here? It seems that I can't run away this time. The fat man knelt down and roared to the sky, going crazy. When everyone heard the name, Ji Yufeng, they were suddenly shocked, and there was even a hint of panic in their tone of voice. Sensing that everyone's reaction was a bit strange, Miu-Chu looked at Weilinger questioningly. Weilinger explained in due course, Ji Yufeng is the captain of the law enforcement team among the 3 teams in the Yuhai security zone. Because of his ruthless style and equal treatment of awakened people, Yuhai base has maintained the unity and coexistence of ordinary people and awakened people. It can be said that Ji Yufeng is the cornerstone of order in Yuhai base. Hearing Wei Linger's explanation, Mu Chu nodded, but he still didn't understand why others were so frightened when Ji Yufeng was mentioned. Even concubine Lu Qing of the Holy Mother looked a little conflicted. Wei Linger added, but it is precisely because of the ruthlessness of his methods that once an awakened person violates the order of Yuhai, he will immediately be severely hit by Ji Yufeng. There are already no less than 2 digits of awakened people because of this. He violated the order of Yuhai base and was executed by Ji Yufeng himself. He was indifferent to the survivors, and even more ruthless to the awakened ones. Coupled with his powerful and terrifying abilities, he was also dubbed the White God of Death. Everywhere it passes, there is killing, just like the sickle of death reaping and slaughtering life. After hearing Wei Linger's explanation, Mu Chu finally understood why Fatty and others changed their attitude towards Ji Yufeng. With Ji Yufeng's ruthless character, if he was caught with some leverage, he would not be bitten to death like a mad dog. The fat man interjected. I heard that Ji Yufeng hates all awakened people because his family was tortured and killed by awakened people with supernatural powers. But the irony is that he also awakened his supernatural powers not long after. The fat man seemed to really have no good impressions of Ji Yufeng, and suggested, how about our team don't go, and then we will say that we were attacked by a group of zombies on the way. Wei Linger helplessly replied. The order from above came just now, asking us to gather at the central square of Linan, where the final mission will be carried out. A flash of throbbing emerged from the depths of Mu Chu's pupils. It's called Daishandi Entertainment Club. In a street in the center of Linan, 2 heavily armed off-road vehicles were speeding past. The streets were full of scrapped vehicles, the walls of the high-rise buildings on both sides were rusty and smelled of decay, and the asphalt ground was scorched black with mottled blood stains. The fat man sat in the driver's seat and drove the car. He turned to Mu Chu and the others behind him and said, It's strange, how come there are fewer and fewer strange things along the way? The weird things Fatty calls are those high-level heretics that are different from ordinary zombies. Since they drove all the way here, although there are still a lot of zombies along the way, they have not seen any high-level zombies above Class B. At this moment, several ragged zombies roared out from the corner. But the fat man was not afraid at all when he controlled the huge off-road vehicle. He stepped on the accelerator and ran over it. How could a few ordinary zombies withstand this violent impact? They were instantly knocked to pieces and their flesh and blood flew everywhere. The 2 off-road vehicles sped down and soon arrived at their destination, Linan Central Square. The entire square seemed unusually empty, with only the powerful hum of car engines echoing. It wasn't until they arrived at the center of the square that the team finally discovered a team of hundreds of people stationed here. It's from the law enforcement team. When Fatty saw this team, he reminded him loudly, no wonder those high-level zombies in the nearby streets have disappeared. They should have been wiped out by these evil stars. A dozen army green tents were stationed on the ground, and several bonfires were rising not far away. A human team of hundreds of people was stationed majestically in this large open-air square. Mu Chu looked at these law enforcement soldiers, uniformly dressed in black with great interest. Although there are only a small number of awakened people here, the rest of the human beings have obviously received special training. They are strong and full of blood. They must be special forces before the end of the world. After several people got out of the car, a man wearing a military cap walked out of the law enforcement team. After confirming everyone's identities, the man in the military hat led the team to a bonfire in the center of the square. A group of awakened people had gathered near the tent near the bonfire. The first person was wearing a white suit, with white hair and a delicate face. He looked extremely indifferent. Even when he saw Mu Chu and others arriving, he did not make any move. Wei Linger and a few people found an open space next to the campfire to sit down. It seemed that many search teams around them had just arrived. The fat man whispered to Mu Chu from the side, "This guy with a dead face is Ji Yufeng, the captain of the law enforcement team. Don't let him get caught easily. This guy treats awakened people much more harshly than zombies and so on." Quote. After hearing this, Mu Chu looked at Ji Yufeng, who was sitting not far away. The law enforcement captain, known as the White Death, also reacted very sharply. He turned his head the moment Mu Chu looked at him. Ji Yufeng looked at Mu Chu with his emotionless eyes. Miu Chu was stared at by this cold gaze and was not afraid. Instead, she raised the corners of her mouth and responded with a peaceful smile on her face. At this moment, a rapid engine sound came from a distance. I saw a cool and luxurious convertible sports car speeding towards me from the other side of the street. A richly dressed young man stepped out of the car, wearing sunglasses and a beautiful hairstyle. At first glance, he looked like an aristocratic young man out for fun. Behind him were also several young men dressed as playboys, but when it came to the image of a fool, they were far inferior to the man in sunglasses who led the way. The man in sunglasses walked up to the crowd, took off his sunglasses and said calmly, "Good morning everyone, the incense hunting team is here to report. I am very happy to see that all of my old friends have arrived here safely." The man in sunglasses seemed to be quite familiar with the team of searchers present. When he saw Ji Yufeng, who was wearing a white suit sitting in front of the tent, his face showed even more surprise. He stepped forward and complimented, "Brother Ji, why are you here in person? What task can you give us, and our team can help you handle it properly?" Ji Yufeng naturally didn't take advantage of this flattery, and just gave the man in sunglasses a cold look. The man in sunglasses felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and he suddenly shivered. Seeing that the flattery was slapped on the horse's leg, he did not dare to say anything more. The man in sunglasses turned around, and when he looked in the direction of Miu Chu's team, a delighted smile suddenly appeared on his face. I saw him running up to Wei Ling'er and Lu Qingfei in a hurry, showing a smile that he thought was very charming. "Isn't this the charming Miss Ling'er? We are really destined. Even in the horrific ruins of the city, the goddess of fate still allowed us to meet here. This is such a great fate." After saying this, he actually bent down and knelt down to take Wei Ling'er's hand. Wei Ling'er had a look of obvious disgust on her face, dodged the man in sunglasses, and angrily said, "Chun Nan, I have no fate with a playboy like you. It's a pity that you didn't die in the hands of zombies." Seeing that this move was ineffective against Wei Ling'er, the man in sunglasses turned his attention to Lu Qingfei. Of course, the same routine was still ruthlessly rejected by Lu Shengsheng. The fat man looked at the man in sunglasses with disdain in his eyes, and explained to Miu Chu, "This pretentious man is called Chu Nan. Before the apocalypse, he was a typical rich second generation with no knowledge and skills. After the apocalypse broke out, he was also killed by this kid. Awakened the superpower. Thankfully there is order in Yuhai to restrain him, otherwise I don't know how many little girls would suffer." Virgin. Miu Chu was stunned. "Hey, Lao Chen, you are here." At this moment, a search team wearing work clothes walked towards Chen Weo. The group of people were all in their 40s or 50s, and some of them were wearing yellow safety helmets. They looked like they had just stepped out of a construction site. When Chen Weo saw this group of people, a smile appeared on his face. "Lao Li and Lao Zhang, you are here too." The leading worker put his arm around Chen Weiguo's shoulders familiarly and said with a grin, "Brothers, we haven't gotten together in a while. After all, we were fellow workers who worked together back then." Then, he looked at the position of Miu Chu and others, and asked doubtfully, "Hey, why don't you see Konghua?" Mentioning Song Konghua, the smile on Chen Weiguo's face was obviously lonely, and he sighed, "Konghua is dead." What? Several workers seemed to know Song Konghua, and they were extremely surprised to hear the news of his death. Chen Weo had a look of guilt on his face. "It was my fault that I failed to keep an eye on Konghua. I clearly promised Lao Song to take good care of his son." Sensing the sad atmosphere among several workers when they mentioned Song Konghua's death, Miu Chu calmly withdrew her gaze. Song Konghua provoked him, but Miu Chu killed him casually. It's that simple, no regrets, no regrets. Suddenly, Miu Chu felt a breath approaching him. "Little brother Miu Chu." A ball of softness hit Miu Chu's firm back, and a charming voice reached Miu Chu's ears. The air carried a light fragrance of flowers that was refreshing. A pair of delicate and flawless jade hands embraced Miu Chu's shoulders, and a seductive red lips leaned against Miu Chu's ear. "What a coincidence, you are here too." Miu Chu, who was well prepared, stretched out her hand to hold the green-white jade finger on her shoulder, and chuckled, "I don't remember that the relationship between us is so close, right, Lu Qianchen? Little brother Miu Chu is really heartless. It's in vain, sister, that I have been thinking about you day and night." Miu Chu turned her head and saw an extremely charming face. Miu Chu remembered that this person was the enchanting woman who fought with Weilinger to win her over at the training ground that day. She seemed to be named Lu Qianchen. Lu Qianchen still wore a red-patterned cheongsam, and her charming face was charming. The beauty mole under the corner of her eye added a bit of charm to her, and her slit thighs were looming, giving people unlimited imagination. How have you been spending this time in Sister Linger's team? Lu Qianchen licked her seductive red lips. If you are not satisfied with Sister Linger's place, you are welcome to come to Sister's place at any time. Sister, you are welcome to join me at any time. At this moment, Chi-Chi, who was wearing an orange-red dress, was weaving a flower rope in her hands and slowly placed the iron tower woven with flower rope in front of Miu Chu. Miu Chu looked at Chi-Chi with soft eyes and gently rubbed the girl's head. Lu Qianchen couldn't help but froze when she saw Chi-Chi's angelic face, and a flash of surprise flashed in her eyes. Only then did he react, and said with an enchanting smile, "No wonder little brother Miu Chu disdains the company of ordinary women like my sister. It turns out that there are such stunning beauties around me already." The well-dressed Chu Nan was rejected by both Weilinger and Lu Qingfei, and felt frustrated inside. But then, an orange-red silhouette came into his eyes. I'll wipe it, and there is such a top-quality thing. That appearance, that figure, that cool temperament. Chu Nan swore that even before the end of the world, he had never seen such a unique girl. It was as if she had stepped out of the second dimension. He couldn't help but move forward to strike up a conversation. "This beautiful lady, may I ask you?" Just when Chu Nan showed off his gentlemanly demeanor as always and planned to capture this girl's heart, he accidentally caught a glimpse of an enchanting figure. Lu Qianchen. Seeing Lu Qianchen's figure, Chu Nan's expression suddenly became frightened, and his body trembled suddenly. Lu Qianchen's lips curled up and she chuckled, "Hey, isn't this a virgin? What a coincidence that you were also summoned here. Sister Qianchen, what you said is right. I am also a member of the Yuhai base. It is my duty to call me, Chu Nan, from the base." Chu Nan seemed to be afraid of Lu Qianchen when he got better. He seemed submissive in front of her and no longer had any gentlemanly demeanor. Lu Qianchen seemed to have no interest in Chu Nan. She just said a word and then looked at Miu Chu. "Little brother Miu Chu, if you change your mind at any time, sister is always here to welcome you." Lu Qianchen did not hide her admiration for Miu Chu at all. Before leaving, she put her bare hands on her lips and left Miu Chu with a blowing kiss, followed by her graceful and voluptuous figure. After Lu Qianchen left, Chu Nan seemed to have put down a heavy burden. He breathed a long sigh of relief, and the fear hidden in his eyes slowly disappeared. Chu Nan straightened his back again and looked at Chi-Chi, and at some point he had a rose in his mouth. A confident smile appeared on his face again. "Miss, I haven't asked you your name yet." As he said this, he couldn't help but grab the girl's hand in front of him. Chi-Chi subconsciously moved closer to Miu Chu. Suddenly, Chu Nan's outstretched hand was firmly clamped by the other hand. "Who?" Chu Nan's eyes immediately turned fierce. His attitude towards men was completely different from that of women. Miu Chu narrowed her eyes slightly and smiled lightly. "What do you want to do?" "You." Chu Nan was instantly angry. No one in Yuhai had ever dared to speak to him like this. But before he finished speaking, a scene that horrified him happened. Miu Chu's hand holding Chu Nan's palm was surrounded by fluorescent blue mist, and then it expanded into a magnificent line of frost, spreading along Chu Nan's arm and freezing Chu Nan's entire arm in an instant. Chu Nan was so frightened that he turned pale. No matter how stupid he was at this moment, he knew that he was encountering a ruthless person, so he quickly got out of the way. Elemental system. Chu Nan covered his frozen arm with a look of fear on his face. Miu Chu, however, didn't even look at him. She took Lu Qi's delicate jade hand and walked away. Ji Yufeng saw this scene from a distance and narrowed his eyes to look at Miu Chu's back. Is he the Miu Chu that Weilinger brought back from the ruins? The man in a military hat next to him replied, "Now he has joined Weilinger's team. I remember that our people were still monitoring his arrival some time ago, right?" While Ji Yufeng asked, his eyes turned to Jiqi who was beside Miu Chu. "Who is this girl?" The subordinate next to him replied, "The awakened ones in the base don't have such faces, they should be new ones." Chi-Chi's face is as delicate as a porcelain doll from an anime. Once you see her, you will never forget her. No wonder the subordinates around you are so determined. Ji Yufeng nodded, his indifferent face still showing no expression, but his eyes were fixed on the backs of Mu Chu and Chi-Chi. A level. Ji Yufeng opened and closed his lips and murmured. The moment Mu Chu took action, Ji Yufeng instantly noticed the powerful wave of supernatural power. He was a little curious about how an awakened person who was only a low-level B-level person a week ago rose to the A-level level in just a few days. Watch what he does. Ji Yufeng slowly ordered his subordinates. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.